hot around topics that can sometimes happen, it is the facilitator's job to bring it back around to the issues at hand and the interests, and to keep, like she said, keep the personalities and the personal issues out of it. So in that respect, it works very well for that.
And it's just a list. I won't read those to you because I know you can read those, but those are just some of the things that a facilitator does throughout the process. And I know you've heard the term taking you to the woodshed. Sometimes that's what they might have to do if somebody gets, and I've had to do that, and it's not so bad.
And you might talk a little bit about how you sometimes have them for both sides and sometimes for one.
I guess, yeah, for the many years that we facilitated in Parkway, we finally got to a point where we decided that we would just use one facilitator, because we had a person who was very neutral and could take us through the process and not be biased one way or the other. So that worked out, and of course it saved us some money too. And if you can find a person like that to just follow the process to make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to do and your issues are being resolved, that works beautifully.
And sometimes you can have a facilitator for both sides. The administration gets one and the association gets one, because my role, if I'm with my members at the table, is not to get involved with that. I'm one of the people that are bargaining at the table. So we have different jobs, and that's why Jawanda does this for the training and facilitates this. She would have a separate role than I would. So.
Okay, and then kind of an overview. There are 3 different models of negotiation. Mm-hmm. I'll let you.
So I think Melville, like a lot of the districts that I work with, are pretty used to positional bargaining, and I don't know, I think some of you have been on the bargaining team before. I think you have, and probably before I started sitting at the table with the folks. But positional is where you pretty much come in with a proposal, you look it over, you talk about it, the ins and outs. The team says maybe they want to go and caucus, or they want to go talk about that, and then they come back to you, or else they'll say, we'll take it under consideration, talk about it next time. And then you expect them, when they come back, to have some sort of a counter proposal. So there's not a lot of discussion in the room necessarily all the time about what's going on, and people leave when they want to say, hey, enough, stop, let's go back and caucus, and talk. Whereas, and Jawanda will talk about the interest base, but that's more done together. Concession is where somebody feels that they've lost something and there's no considerations of their interests. So what was your example on that? You remember on concession?
Oh, where somebody comes in and says, well, we'll add $100 to the base salary and that's it, nothing else. That's, you either take it or leave it.
So you come in with that position, you don't discuss it necessarily, or you at least don't move very much on it. There's not a real getting to the reasons underlying. I guess that's the real definition. So.
And collaborative or interest-based, in that process, you value the interest of all the people in the room on both sides. This is the one that I've been involved in for years in Parkway, and it's worked great. We've built great relationships with the administration, and I think even our board members began to see the value of having that relationship, because the bottom line, we all had basically the same interest, trying to do what's best for kids. And that's one way that you do that. And sometimes through these conversations and discussing interests, you find that, hey, this is a great way to solve problems, or we didn't realize that was going on. So it really gives you an opportunity to listen and hear about things that maybe you would have never heard of otherwise. It's problem solving for both parties. That's the role. And you're hard on the issues and soft on the people. That's part of, you're not focusing on positions, you're focusing on interests. You're exploring interests, you're flexible, trying to understand options and alternatives that other people come up with. And just because Jamie presents an idea, you say, well, I don't want to, you shut him out. You don't do that. Everybody's ideas are important. And that's what's so neat about this whole process. And we'll talk more about how you go through evaluating your options against standards that you would develop. And it's pretty neat process. But in an interest-based strategy, either party can always say no, but you have a responsibility to explain your objection in terms of your interest. So you just can't say, no, we're not going to entertain that. It's a little bit more to it than that. So it's kind of like no one can really bow out of the process. Not really. Let's see, getting to, yeah, go ahead.
So when I first learned this process, I thought that trying to, when I'd hear about interests versus positions, that was kind of confusing to me in terms of what are they and how do you use them, how do you define them, and how does that make the process better. So she explained what they are, and we're going to go through that in one little sort of very small simulation. But I came up with a example in bargaining that might be helpful in helping to clarify. So a position from the association side that we might bring to a bargain might be something like they want and need a 3% increase to the salary base. Sound familiar? A counter position from the district may be that they don't want to commit that money to the salary schedule. So there you've got two positions. But if you start talking about the interests involved in that, it's a conversation about, an interest might be that both the association and the district believe that stability and retaining good teachers is best for kids. So you couldn't really probably argue that the association and the district feel that way. Therefore, the conversation is focused on how both parties can achieve that, rather than we want 3%, we have no money. This is the interest underneath that. I don't think anybody could disagree that if you have teachers that want to stay and they feel supported and they feel like they're getting compensated and that they're getting treated in a good way, they'll stay. And that's good for the kids, it's good for the teachers, and good for administration all around. So I hope that helps clarify the difference.
Okay. Interest-based bargaining, there's a whole list of things there. It's about understanding, respecting multiple perspectives, examining interest, addressing all issues, engaging in dialogue, trust, assisting rather than persisting, seeking creative solutions, seeking the best solution, and just believing in the strength of the group. Because actually, once the issues and the interest are out on the table, the whole group, both teams, you own them together, and you work together to try to come up with the best solutions. And that's where believing in the strength of the group, believing that you can come up with that together, is very important. We're not going to really go into communication styles, although that's very important to discover your communication style, because we all have a different style, and it's important for you to kind of know the characteristic of each one of those styles, so that you can, I guess,
know how to mesh.
Yeah, exactly. But we have some that we've listed here, like avoidance. That's a type of behavior that you might see. It's non-confrontational. The person just kind of ignores what's going on, or they're passed over. And that's the importance, too, of having a facilitator, because if you are going through the process and you notice, say, that President Stormer hasn't participated, you do something to try to pull her into the conversation. And you might discover there's a reason why she's avoiding. Or sometimes avoiding is denying that an issue is a problem. Accommodation, you're just agreeable, non-assertive, you're not mindful of trying to meet any goals that you've set. Competition, confrontational, aggressive, assertive, and you must win at any cost. Compromise, important that all parties achieve basic goals and maintain relationships. It's aggressive, but it's cooperative. That's the difference. And of course, collaboration, the needs of both parties are legitimate and they're important. And there's high respect for mutual support. When you can work together to gain that, it's assertive and it's cooperative. So that's a little bit of the differences in those different styles.
Okay, so now they need to look at those.
Okay, you have a single sheet with the core components. It says interest-based bargaining process. The first one is sharing or selecting an issue. And this is where you the issue is in the form of a question, and I think
So this is the process from beginning to end, and this would take more training to actually, kind of go through it and really start to understand it. So we're doing the fast track.
Right.
And so we're going to do a little simulation, but we're not going to act it out. Okay. So do you want me to just start with that?
Yeah, and the issue is always stated in the form of a question. And the question is?
Okay, so instead of saying, we have an issue with safety in the buildings at our schools, it would be formed into a question like, how can we ensure the safety of our students and staff in the classroom, as well as provide the best physical environment for students and employees? So that question would go up on the board. Facilitators would be writing all this out there too, so you'd see it, okay? So you start with that. And then the next thing on the list, discuss all the interests, or I'm sorry, tell the story.
You would tell the story.
So instead of just saying this is an issue, people are getting hurt, and it's kind of general, you would tell a story like, I'm a building rep in Blades, and I get on average a report from my colleagues that they've been assaulted by students 3-4 times a week. Okay, so in another building, it's been reported that students and teachers are having breathing issues due to environmental conditions such as mold. So I start talking a little bit more about the stories, not necessarily naming names, but a little bit about the people and what's going on and why that's a problem. So now it's just not this generic, general sort of thing that is abstract. You're bringing it down into a human element in a story. So you kind of have a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more understanding. And then, let's see.
And during this process, also during the storytelling part of it, any person from the other side, other team, can ask clarifying questions. You don't get into a debate, but you ask clarifying questions if there's something maybe that you don't understand about what the person has said during the storytelling part of it.
Then, when you start generating options, you're brainstorming for ways to settle that issue. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, and as I said, if Jamie comes up with an idea, we just go through and just put a defogger or something in all the buildings to get rid of the mold. Well, No, that's his idea. So it's a, and that's why you have.
You guys need to wrap up right now.
But anyway, so those are just, I guess, some of the things, and again, when you have standards, you can see on the sheet some of the standards, if they're workable, fair, if they're legal, equitable, those kinds of things. And some things right away, you would realize, Jamie's idea just wouldn't fly. So, you
Right,
just
and so,
kick
and that's the thing, is that you don't put Vinky down for his idea, you put it up there, and then later you'll sort of go through whether it's legitimate. So,
Yeah.
so, like, she and I were just saying, well, if we brainstorm for that, what would we come up with? And don't worry about whether it's a ridiculous idea or not. So one of us said, students who assault teachers need to be removed from the immediate environment and put in an alternative setting. So that just, right away your head's going, oh, that can't be done because, never mind that. Just put it up there as an option and leave it so that everybody can see it. You'll go through it a little bit later to figure out whether or not it's legal, and she's going to talk about that, whether it's doable, legal, whatever the case may be. But the whole idea is nobody's idea is dead. It's going up there, it's being looked at, and then it's being assessed. Okay.
And the other thing, sometimes you discover that through some of these options, you might discover there's something that you need to look more closely into, maybe forming a committee or a study team to look at it and do some additional research or work on it. One of the other things we had mentioned, I guess was an option for the mold for the buildings, was developing like a collaborative team from district personnel that consisted of not just maybe maintenance, but people, teachers and other, say the custodian from that building, form a team. And once a year or whatever, you may decide, we'll go around, we'll check for mold or whatever the case might be. So those are just some options, ways to generate options. Okay, the next slide has the word all by itself, and that's kind of the key word, and it's trust is established by the way you encourage communication, and that's two-way communication. Trust is something that will build over time. It's not something that's automatic, and the level of trust will rise and fall as you have different experiences, because those experiences bring about different effects. Sometimes it's okay for it to be tested because you realize having those courageous and difficult conversations will bring about some great ideas. Let's see. Usually in trust, information is shared openly, and I guess it's kind of like sometimes it's not so much what you say, it's how you say it. And some of us do that better than others, but that openness and honesty is very important. You don't, I guess, talk out of both sides of your mouth or say one thing to one person and then something else to somebody else, because that will not build trust. It actually will kind of destroy your credibility, because people do communicate and have conversations. So that's something, it has to be real communication and real collaboration to build that trust. Okay.
Consensus.
Well, this is, I guess, kind of the bottom line, and the consensus decision-making is, that's what you're trying to reach, is consensus. It doesn't mean that you take a vote, and if, Jean over there, is, she's not voting, she has a right to say what it is that is keeping her from voting or is keeping her silent. That's very important. And the other thing that's important through this whole process is to listen and respect and value other people's ideas through this whole process. Earlier I mentioned behaviors, and we know that body language sometimes speaks much louder than words. And even though, the rolling of the eyes when certain people say things, and those are things that, because people read that, and that's not something that you want.
And I will say, through this process, coming to a consensus, it sounds like, well, what if, you just don't agree with that, so you just can't reach a consensus on it? Well, usually by the time you get to that point, most people are already there, but there might be some little thing that's kind of in the back of their head going, I'm just not real happy with that. So those are real minor issues you can work through. So it's not just you put it up there and it's like, well, what do you think of it? Or this or whatever. You've kind of worked towards getting to where everybody is pretty much in agreement, except for a few little things that you might work out. So, I think that's important to remember.
And it's not something, too, you don't leave the room saying, well, they voted for it, but I was totally against it. That destroys everybody's credibility when you do that. So you just ask yourself, can you actively support it? Can you live with it? But usually when people's ideas have been shared, people have listened to them, they've had an opportunity to express how they feel a little bit better about, well, maybe I can live with that, so. Okay, we're trying to hurry, so it was, you've got.
Well, I think we can probably just skip to questions just so that we can move along.
Okay.
So we just had one more thing, and it's really, not mandatory. So we want to make sure that if anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and
What
ask.
questions do you have?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I, as you were speaking, I couldn't help but put myself back into the 23 years I spent selling cars. Every day was a negotiation with a brand new face. And so much of the things you just talked about are things that the same steps that had to be gone through. We had to establish common ground, which of course in this case is quite easy. It's the students. And then, we would get the what's in it for me out of the way.
Right.
They want the best deal. It's their job. Your job as the customer to get the best price you can get, and it's mine to get as much money out of your pocket as I can possibly get. That's my job. That's your job. So we understand each other. So the correlation between the two things that we're talking about here is uncanny.
Yeah.
It really is. Finally, one of the best closures that I ever had, and I don't know if this would work in the case of the MNEA with negotiations, but if I can do this, will you do that? That was a really good closer for me.
Sure.
When we seemed a million miles apart on the price, the question became, well, if I can do this, will you sign the deal? And at that point, they could only say yes or no, and if they said no, then you have to find out what the objection is.
Right.
Jean, you want to put your microphone?
But it's very similar. What?
Your microphone.
I think because of the two microphones, I'm thinking, John, can you
hear me?
hear Jean?
Yeah.
Because there's two microphones
Thank
sitting
you.
here.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
sitting right
Neither of
there.
us are aware.
I'm like,
But they're both coming across.
Yeah.
So anyway, I can appreciate what you're saying, and it just wakes up a lot of old memories, that's pretty much how it works when there are two people trying to arrive at a common destination, but having to travel to get to it.
Right. Right.
So,
And
Thank you.
it can be a little bit uncomfortable, I think, at first, especially when you're used to, like we were talking about before, you come in with a proposal, and then you guys look at it, you ask a few questions.
Well, that's
and
the
you-
sticker price on the top. Okay? That's the sticker price,
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
you know? So we got, it's working our way down from there. Coming to a common place where we can both live comfortably with the decision.
Sure,
Same thing.
sure.
Maybe I should get on the negotiating team.
That would be great.
Sign her up, you're good.
Well, and it's all about, building those relationships. Like you
Right,
were saying,
exactly.
you have a different customer every day.
Every day.
But the people that, you serve are the students, same people all the time, and they have the same needs. So working together.
See, and I had George Weber, and his needs stayed the same too.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
You guys have any questions?
So you guys mentioned training of some sort, and who provides that, and typically that the director for the so-called, let's say, team.
We have fresh pizza coming.
So when Melville was contemplating it before, at that time, the team, and it may be because your team wasn't fully formed yet, I'm not real sure, but Mark came as a representative for the district team, and then Dawn came with a couple of other people from the association side. M&EA provided that training. So if you are to engage in this, both teams are trained at the same time, so that you know the process, and then when you are ready to begin, of course, then you've got the facilitators that, start the whole putting the issues up on the board or the questions, I should say, and working through them. But you wouldn't just go to the table and try to have to figure it out. You'd be trained first a little bit more deeply than what we're presenting here.
The whole team would be?
Both teams
Both teams.
together.
And then how about the facilitator? Is that a separate training for someone to become a facilitator, or is that typically outside folks that you're bringing in the first year?
Well, it can be, the facilitator has to be trained if they are going to do that process. But usually it's an outsider or someone that you, I guess, trust or feel comfortable with who is trained to do that.
So that
Yeah.
person's role is huge. I mean, that
Right.
training around that facilitator is the one that seems like how this, with the glue to all this.
Exactly. It can be highly emotional.
It is, and a good facilitator keeps things really moving and going well. And any, like I've been in them before where people kind of get a little bit hot, and the facilitator's very good about bringing them out and either taking a break or talking a little bit about what's underlying and then going from there. And the good thing about it is there's just not a whole lot. You can choose to go caucus and talk with your team somewhere else. That's not out of the question. But a lot of that stuff is done at the table, and you just become very efficient at working through things that you don't think you can even work through because how negotiations can be kind of stressful.
I know one year we were kind of gathered in a corner during one of the breaks, and the facilitator noticed that, and she said, you guys should not be doing that. If you have issues that you need to talk about, you need to do it in front of the whole group. And it really had an impact on us, and we realized when we started sharing out, it really wasn't that difficult, because I think, people learn to respect what you have to say, and they are willing to listen. So it's a process, and it can be, like she said, a little uncomfortable at first, but you're also building those relationships. I think for me, that's the key, and that's kind of the rewarding part. And I guess if it says anything, every time I go back, I get a hug from my superintendent. But anyway.
Any other questions?
Kevin, do you have anything? Lisa? Larry? Larry, you don't have like 5 pages of questions written yet? Wow.
That's for later.
Saving it for later. All right, got it. I want to thank you both for coming. For a board, not everybody always has experience with negotiations. You know, Jean has it in a business that she has done. I have done it before, but just because you get on a Board of Education doesn't mean that you ever have any negotiation experience whatsoever. So that was one of the reasons why I thought it was important for you guys to come in, because this is what you guys are doing in those rooms whenever we get to that time of year, every year. And sometimes if you're not, as you know, if you're not in there and hearing everything that's going on, you don't always correlate why somebody may be feeling a certain way or the different conversations that are going on. So it's really nice to be able to know how you guys are doing things, how these work, because then whenever we have to go back into closed session, it makes it a little bit easier for us to be able to put all that information into a proper context of, you know, okay, is this really something we can do? Is this something, you know, what is the process that we have? And for a board, I don't really think we've ever been given any type of training. I know I haven't in the few years. I know you've probably sat in the room on negotiations. Larry, you've sat in as well. But these two have got more years than the rest of us combined. So when you look at how young we still are, it's still very inexperienced on these types of things. So for us to be able to make those good decisions for our district, our teachers, our kids, you know, any type of training is always good. So
And I think
wanna
you
thank
said a very important thing. I think all board members should go through that training, even if they're not a part of the team, just so that they understand the process.
Right. And it makes it easier to put everything into context whenever it comes back. I mean, you only get a little bit of the story because you're not going to sit there and talk about a 2-hour-long meeting for 2 hours to get everybody up to date on every single thing that was said. So we get the short version of it, and we have to be able to make decisions from there. So it's nice to hear how the process happens and how everything works, so.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is pretty much what she said, is that it probably would be a great recommendation if you guys decide to delve into this a little further, that there be a training where both parties are involved, and it doesn't really matter whether all of those parties on either side are all on the team.
Right.
So, okay.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I appreciate it.
For having us.
Thank you.
Hope we got into our little time slot there.
You're good. Thank you. There's pizza too, please.
Have some eat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do
No,
I?
we don't.
No, I was going to say,
There's never too much
Lori
pizza.
and Suzanne want some too.
I have to say, I bought my first car from Jean.
Did you really?
She really took you to the corners.
I left there. And I bought it in the winter.
She
Let
probably
me
would
tell you
too.
something. I always treated people the way I wanted to be
I
treated.
knew it would come to this.
And it worked. It worked for me. You know, and Mr. Bemler, when I started selling cars down in Arnold in 1930, he told me, Jean, don't ever stretch the truth or lie to anybody, because then you got to remember what you told them when they come back, you know. So I just lived with that, and it worked. So, yeah, I was.
Granted, I bought it in the winter, so the summer came and I realized, oh, this doesn't have air conditioning.
What year was that, Grandpa?
Yeah, well, you know me, an impulse kind of person. Oh, this is cool. It was a Jeep.
Well, Dawn got some from me too, I
The
think.
tracker,
for,
the Geo tracker.
yeah.
She bought.
You bought the tracker?
She did.
She did.
I had the Sunbird, the convertible Pontiac.
Yeah, yeah.
But you did let us drive a Corvette.
I will.
Let us drive a Corvette.
You were driving the Corvette? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You went
Yeah.
ravioli. You went crazy.
It's got to be some perks to know the salesperson.
The quorum of the board has moved over there.
Yeah.
That works.
You just heard. You've already heard the journey. Do we have a spoon?
Marshall's dad didn't end up having surgery. They had to cancel it at the last minute because they need a heart specialist rescheduled for next week. Marshall's dad didn't end up having surgery, Sherry said. They had to cancel it at the last minute.
Agenda was the MSBA application. So we had talked and kind of thought maybe just having a couple people do it, work on the application, selecting those 2 people. Jean, I thought maybe you might be good for heading that up. Are you good with that?
yeah, I'll be glad to.
Okay? And then you can figure, I'll let you
What we
pick
need to do.
somebody that you want to work with on it,
Well,
because it
who
would
would like
probably,
to work on it with me? Let me start with that.
the MSBA application. I figured I'd
Or
put
the,
Jean in charge of it.
Yeah, which,
Well, a board of distinction, right?
Right.
but but you get that if you have,
The-
Larry knows the criteria. I don't know that you
The
have to
Board
apply
of
for it.
Distinction is based upon attendance
Wasn't
at the regional
He
meeting.
knows about it.
It's attendance at the conference. We didn't have enough, I don't know if we had enough people at conference. I'll have to check. But if we had
5, I think.
5 there,
I think it was 5, yeah.
so we
No, I
met.
don't know that we had 5.
See,
I'm
there's no
saying-
application for that. The application is for one of the 6 areas in the OBO area, Outstanding Board of Education.
Right,
That's the one you have to fill out.
okay. Is that the one we're going to shoot for then? Obo?
You got
I'm
6
fine with that.
choices. You can only do one.
Okay.
Are we writing something? Are you asking for help about writing something?
Yeah, well,
I can.
would someone be willing to, if I need help on it, to help me with it? Of course. Okay, thank you, Lisa.
And I'm sure, and I can get examples. Matter of fact, they're probably online of the winners from the last 2 or 3 years in these categories.
Yeah, there is, I'm sure.
And if aren't, I can get them.
Okay, I'll take care of it,
You all good then?
yeah.
All right.
So what was the subject we picked?
Huh?
Which of the 6 are we going to pick?
List them.
Well, here, I'll just look them up right now
No, I've
and tell
got
you
'em.
what they are. You got them
I've got 'em
handy?
right here.
Okay,
The 6 categories you can nominate in, you can need teaching, learning, and assessment is 1. Climate and culture organizations, 2. Physical and environmental resources. Human organization and capital. School finances, and governance, leadership, and accountability. And if you go and look at these, there's like either anywhere from 4 to 6 metrics they look at. I looked through them.
I like the last one.
yeah,
I will tell you the 2 that we fit the best with are physical and environmental resources and school finance.
Really?
Yeah. I think
We're on the same wave today, Gene.
of the dimension of what they explain, we're light years ahead in those 2 areas.
huh.
That's personal opinion. I'm not.
Okay, so, well, I'll research
Let's look
these
at all
things
3.
and send a link to each of you of what we're looking at on these things, and then, once we narrow it down, we'll go from there.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try to do that in the next few days.
We've got to March, I think it's March 9th to fill them out.
Okay.
Is that good with you guys?
Whatever.
Let's hear a big whatever.
All right. Moving on. So the next thing, and was probably the biggest reason for all of this, is that in each meeting, we kind of go through, we talk about what we're spending here, what we're doing there. And so you better make sure you remember one conversation from year to year to year, and hope that a new board member coming on has taken the time to get caught up and knows exactly what we've already talked about over the past year. So I kind of wanted to go over just what our 5-year plan looked like, how our resources are being spent. We're doing a lot of changes in the district right now, so are our resources still benefiting our kids the way they need to? Do we need to move some things around? Just kind of have a general conversation about, what does block scheduling with a C-Day look like now? If we move to a flex model, what does it look like? What does our staffing kind of look like? Things like that. So, and just kind of an open conversation around all of that. So, Chris, do you want to give us an update, just kind of on the 5-year plan, just any changes? Really, is our biggest change just the math and the social studies?
Yeah, for right now, it's the biggest change, the switch, the movement of the K-5 curriculum revision and pushing back the social studies piece. That's the big change. I mean, there'll be some other stuff that we'll meet with
depend on some actions in the next couple of weeks, in the next couple of months that could influence some things in there. But probably, at least for me, one of the most exciting things that we have going on right now is that our high school innovations group talked about the early college piece. We have kids doing that today.
Right. Awesome. That's wonderful.
We've already got the schedule for next fall ready to go. Oakville at least has got a big parent night scheduled for later this month to talk about, a lot of the options that are going to be available. And they're doing that actually at the Merrimack campus. So
That'd be nice.
So, the high school stuff that we got going on is pretty exciting. And the options that kids will have. The CAPS event next week, so a lot of stuff going on.
I love what we have going on there. I mean, I wish Bryce was not maybe halfway through his junior year, which means you're getting old too.
So I don't have anybody involved in the block scheduling piece, so I don't get it as much as you do, or as I guess, it's not real time for me. I mean, I get how it works. But how do these innovative pieces fit into that schedule?
So as we move to the flex schedule in the second year, the schedule itself is not as rigid as what we have now. So it allows more for the kids to flow in and out and to create pieces. Kind of the academy piece that we were talking about, I kind of describe it in my own head as kind of a design your own high school experience almost.
Yes, it's just like a college.
Really, it's kind of limited to juniors and seniors more than, probably a little bit more. So, being able to come in and out of the school at various increments rather than just 4 solid hard points will be helpful.
Agreed, but they're doing it right now, and right now we're 80, right?
They're not to the level that we're talking about.
We haven't
Yeah, one component.
Okay.
Just the one, we don't have the academy.
And does that start next year?
It'll start next year, I think that we're going to expect it to follow kind of the same trajectory as CAPS. Oh, that sounds really cool. I want to do that. Oh, but none of my friends are doing that. Right? So I think that's going to how it's going to start out. I mean, if you look at some of the articles that have been out on CAPS and some of the related video with that, our students who are doing that are getting amazing experiences. And it's them talking about their experiences that are going to cause that to grow. So I think the academy piece, the early college piece, they're going to be small in the beginning and they're going to grow. Our partnership with CAPS is really based around work out of Baylor. And we were talking yesterday, we both kind of think that, this year was kind of a nice little kind of expansion year to us. Next year we'll see a little bit more of that, and we think the year after, 18-19, will be hopefully a bigger year for CAPS. So I think we'll see a slow kind of growth with the academy concepts. And the early college stuff. Just as more people learn about it, as more people see how other kids experience it, as folks understand how cheap it will be to get college credit while kids are still in high school, and the kind of core content courses that have been put together will transfer to any Missouri public college or university. So that transferability is
Very
a big
important.
thing.
So we will move into that flex model as long as the first phase works well. The outcomes are what we're looking for with that C-date put in there, right? And the goal would be year 2, we move into the flex model, we'll get a report in between there. And that will open up the opportunity to really be able to expand, and more students will be, it's just a culture change, right? More students will be able to take advantage of it with the feedback from
It
fellow
is,
students.
and it's also a recognition that some classes need to meet every day.
Agreed. Their
So-
presentation was spot on, I thought. So,
Yeah.
depending upon what kind of learner you are and depending upon the content, agreed.
So the flex schedule too will allow for a degree of student choice in whether to have some classes every day, other classes every other day, or maybe every class every other day. And that flexibility and that ability to choose increases with your number of years in high school.
Right.
It's not gonna, there's not a lot of flexibility for freshmen.
Sure.
A little
No,
bit more
they
for
have to take what they have to take.
Gain that
Foundational.
flexibility, largely based around graduation requirements. We're trying to knock out as many of those, core kind of requirements early in your freshman year.
Right.
Well, I was just going to say,
Look like you're-
so instead of,
You say something.
basically, instead of putting those kids and fitting them into that schedule,
Yeah.
their schedule will be determined based on that academy, or as they're going. It may not even consist of individual classes or that specific block or any of that. It may be completely different. So,
I think it's a great idea,
And what well, the academy's going to kind of look different for every kid,
which is also a great idea.
kind of the way it's based, but what it looks like next year, what it looks like the year after, it's going to
Could
evolve.
evolve, yeah.
And just to clarify on the math, I think you mentioned that it's going to be reviewed next year. The curriculum's going to be reviewed, so the actual implementation won't happen until 18-19, isn't that correct?
That is accurate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So there was that one confusion I had maybe a year or so ago when I emailed on why we're buying these particular textbooks, why we're not, because I didn't get that the first time I looked at it either.
Yeah,
So,
because what we do is we spend a full year reviewing, the process we have now is we spend a full year reviewing curriculum, bringing in professionals at times to help us look at standards, we review standards, we align curriculum, we do all that work prior to doing any research into any types of resources to support that curriculum implementation.
right.
Yeah.
So next year, really nothing will change. And you had mentioned, I think in one of your presentations, that it would be incredibly difficult to do that process now to implement changes for 17, 18. I think is kind of what you're...
Yes, because we're doing elementary science right now,
Wow,
and we've spent the first entire semester, we've had a whole team of teachers that have been going through training, and we've been researching and rewriting curriculum, and yeah, we're very deep into the process right now.
Right.
Absolutely.
You don't have the manpower to tackle another subject.
And in addition to that, you'd be looking at then implementing 2 new curriculums with elementary teachers.
In the same year.
The same year,
Right.
because it's different when you're looking at middle school and high school, because secondary, they're content-based, so they aren't trying to teach multiple subjects, versus at elementary, they're teaching all the
Everything.
subjects. Yeah, it's just a very different, yeah. That being said, though, we are looking at some things to start right away. I don't know if you want to
Well,
go into that at this point or not.
Well, it's kind of not, it's to some extent immediate, but
True,
it's
yes.
largely built into next year. But we met with Discovery yesterday and essentially built a math leader core in the same framework as we have our STEM leader core for middle school. So we'll be ready to launch, kind of have a launch on that at the end of March, and build that leader core, which is kind of a train-the-trainer kind of model.
That's what I thought.
And then that, we'll be able to kick that off into next year, and then that will be a 3-year commitment.
So we're bridging.
Yes.
We're bridging where we are now.
Yes.
Recognizing where we would like to be, and we know that we want to be better than we are. We don't have the resources to do that now because it does take a long time to assess where we need to go, and I'm sure figuring out software or whatever products it is that you're going to go with a new curriculum. And then you're going to put some things in place to boost the areas where we're wanting to work more diligently, but we can't right now, but we will the following year.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting.
Yes.
We had a little conversation last night. We were working on some stuff, and one of our really good teachers kind of said, well, what if we do this? And that is pretty much the model that we're going to be doing with Discovery.
Well, that's good to know. And that was the question. At least I recollect, the main question was, okay, wow, is there anything that we can be doing now to just try to bridge that a little bit? And I know you're doing the guided math pilots that I think, Brian, you spoke of at our last meeting, and maybe there's an opportunity for those kinds of opportunities to also occur if they're successful in the pilot for next
Well, I think
year,
it's
or do we know yet?
Say that again, Lisa.
I think you were remarking about some guided math pilots that you're currently doing, and I was saying if those are successful, you have the outcomes that you're looking for, will those be able to also be in place next year until a new curriculum goes into place, or?
Yes. Well, there's a couple pieces to that. One, and I say the same verbiage too, but it's not a new curriculum, and that's a good thing because the standards are going to stay the same. We're just talking about adopting some new resources to get us to the standards. So I think that's key because in the meantime, it's not even just bridging. There's a lot of things that we can do right now. One piece of which, like we talked about, is we're doing a lot more of the guided math trainings for the teachers, and we got multiple teachers and buildings that are using that. So yeah, that'll ultimately be district-wide. The second piece that we talked a little bit about is we have both Forder and Oakville Elementary that are piloting Front Row, which is the digital software enhancement tool that focuses on math. And ultimately, we're going to look at the results of that before the end of this year. And then Tina and I put into the notes what that would cost to roll that out district-wide. So if that's successful, we'd like to. That would be piece 2, and then you got piece 3, which is going to be the train-the-trainer model, where we're going to have teachers at each building, where those classrooms will ultimately be learning labs where they can coach and work with the other teachers. And that way it can spread throughout each of the schools. So I think we feel really confident in this approach that we're hitting this math challenge, this math issue from multiple angles.
And the specific reason we reached out to Discovery Ed is because we are seeing success with the STEM Innovator Program. And I reached out to them and said, hey, do you have anything like this with math? Because we're seeing students are responding, teachers are responding, we're seeing it already that it's beginning to spread to other classrooms in the middle school, even the teachers that are not the innovators. So that's where we reached out to them and said, can you help us develop something like this? And so I've been working with them over the last few months actually to try and see what type of a program they could put together. And then we had a meeting yesterday where we kind of were working out some final details on a proposal and some plans. So yeah, I'd say we're really excited about that opportunity because I think when we talk about the core being the thing that we really feel like we need to strengthen, that's bridging that gap to help to start to strengthen that core and to spread that by starting with a strong group of teachers and then having the model classrooms and expanding that across the district.
And are we looking at, we had talked about possibly putting in the 2 coaching positions. Is that something that we would look at starting this next year as well in with that, or
is that even part of it with a train-the-trainer or a focused math?
We think the train-the-trainer concept of this math leader core can kind of replace the notion or take the place of the notion of just adding people. Now, that being said, we're kind of still exploring that notion of a kind of director, coordinator position for math, STEM, Project Lead the Way, which would include some coaching pieces in that position.
right? And could those coaching positions be teachers that we already have? I mean, like more of our, like the teacher that brought up.
So the math leader core will be our existing.
Okay, great.
Will be our existing teachers. So they will have to essentially apply
Okay.
to be a part of that group.
Good.
And that's for elementary and middle school.
Okay.
It's kind of the best of both worlds, because in the other model, even though interventionists can be really helpful, but we were talking about it as a cabinet, and, so sometimes your plan is, our core's not in great shape, so to throw a Band-Aid at it, we're going to pluck our 10 or 12 best math teachers out of the entire district, and they're going to work with groups of 3 to 4 of the lowest kids in each classroom, and they're not going to have time in that schedule to coach and coach up the other teachers. So it can be really counterproductive if your core is not where it needs to be, as opposed to this model where your best teachers are staying in the classroom, but then they're also coaching and serving as mentors to the people around them.
Well, and I would almost have to think that the program would have to be strong in itself, otherwise your interventionists, aren't they just doing the same thing that your teachers are doing, which is what the kids aren't understanding?
They've had the same PD in
Right.
most cases as the person they're in there to assist.
Okay.
So the kid leaves the big group instruction, sometimes sits with the interventionist hypothetically, and gets the same thing potentially repeated to them again.
Right.
So if the core's not solid, I just don't think we as a team have a lot of faith that would get the results that we need as compared to the model that we're proposing.
Right, now, I know we moved over to Lucy Calkins for reading, and we have the interventionist to help with that, and our interventionist also got that same PD and that same training, and it seems like that has gone over very well, but that is all towards that guided reading as well that has been
Their training
very
is actually a
beneficial.
little bit, they have done units of study training, but their training has been more focused on strategies.
Okay.
So they have monthly trainings. They had 2 full days of training before the school year started, and then they've done monthly trainings with our coaches and with Sarah Farner. And they focus on strategy group trainings, so how to work with individual students on reading strategies to help them close that gap and help them improve their individual reading skills. So yes, they've had some of the same training, but yet their training's been different in focusing more on the strategy pieces.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Helps
So we've
having a
really worked
department chair.
hard on that core part.
Right.
And that's where we feel like, I can tell you when I'm out in buildings, I know when Brian and I walk buildings, the writing we're seeing going on in classrooms is so much better. I mean, I am floored at what's going on in kindergarten and first grade classrooms. They're writing pages
Right.
in first grade, much more than we've seen in the past. So, and I was with first grade actually yesterday at PD, and they're so excited about the improvements they're seeing in their students' reading and writing. So I think we feel like we've worked a long time on reading and writing, and we're seeing some gains.
Right.
And that's where we feel like now we need to do that same thing with math. Let's work on the core, let's really work on that instructional piece with our core teachers and strengthen that before we would consider any other possibilities like an interventionist at that time.
Right, but I think if Lucy Calkins wasn't going over as well as it was, and you had something a little bit more like our math, it wouldn't matter how many people we trained to do it, we're still going to have the same results, so the program itself has to be strong, and the Lucy Calkins has been great. I mean, I have, again, kindergarten and first grader, so to be able to see the difference from one year to the next, and just that difference, I hope we can get to our math program to be as strong as what we've done with the reading, because you guys have done an excellent job with that. I mean, like I said, the difference in a year, and, I actually don't have the same homework coming home, and I don't have the same stuff. I actually have 2 separate things for my kids. Here's Melina's, and then here's McLean's and what she's doing now. So it's neat to see that difference, and I look forward to the math part of it getting that strong too. So, but I'm sure that takes time, because I've heard from the teachers too, and I think, Jean, you have as well, that Lucy Calkins is very, what's the word for it?
Interesting?
It's a good word.
Very comprehensive.
Comprehensive, yes.
We'll go with that.
Thorough.
So,
Takes a
yeah,
lot of work.
I mean, it's very detailed.
The
so.
resource has not been about the materials. The resource that you're putting at it is building teacher capacity.
Right.
Which we've seen in, like Tina said, with literacy, the way we make gains is to build that teacher capacity in order to
Right.
benefit all students, not just some kids getting pulled.
Right.
Right.
I ask a question around the guided math? I've been doing some reading lately, so I might think I'm smarter than I am in some of this stuff, but it seems like the personalized learning thing is really kind of the way to really go in the future, and some of the countries that have done really well with their learning and getting better have kind of gone that way. And that's what I think the guided math part is. And Brian, you explained a little bit about it. I guess I'm just hoping to learn a little bit more of some of the details of how does it actually work in a classroom where, because is it one teacher? Is there more than one teacher? How do they kind of segregate out the class where they know who they have to work with more? What does the other part of the class do? I'm just really curious about that.
Well, Chris can chime in.
Watch one of these. It's really cool the way it works.
It
I
is.
didn't mean to step on your toes there, Brian, but you need to go into one once and see how it works, because it's amazing to see the kids who aren't catching on all of a sudden have special time with the instructor, while the kids who get it are helping the other kids.
It's like what we
okay?
saw Lewis and Clark.
Exactly, yeah. It's amazing.
But they had it where they had 4 teachers among all those kids. So I'm kind of wondering with our setup, how does that work?
Think of it, those 4 classrooms that were able to work together and they could scale.
Right, so with 4 teachers, they had somebody watching kids in the big room, somebody who was doing specialized help over here, another person.
Somebody was
over
teaching the
here.
previous lesson, somebody was teaching the current lesson.
But I think, are we in a situation where it's one teacher in a classroom? So, and if it is, then how does that work, I guess?
Basically, what we're doing now in guided reading, I mean, that's what we do in our elementary schools. We have groups going on in reading, and kids rotate centers, and kids have that individual time with the teacher to work on that personalization on their reading level. So it's basically modeling a lot of what the structures that were put in place with math.
Okay, and I have not seen that. So is that one teacher in a room where they've given things to kids that they're working on, and then they spend the time with the ones that need a little bit more help?
Go see Mrs. Meyer's class down at Rogers. McLean's in her class. And when they do their guided reading and they break into these groups, the kids that already know how to read will work in a group together, and they will go over each other's work with them. So that frees up the teacher to be able to work with the struggling learners a little bit more, because McLean might be proofing, and going over what a writing assignment somebody else did, and they're going to be going over hers and moving along like that. So you have them all in groups where the kids are actually interacting and doing, I guess a lot of it is the teacher becomes almost kind of like a coach, more where I can spend a little bit more time here, but I'm still overseeing that this group is still doing what they're supposed to be doing and moving along. But I would suggest going down and seeing how she runs her class. It's actually very neat.
It's really cool.
All right, I'm getting the message of it.
Yes. No, but I've seen.
All our elementaries, they all have components, I would say, and Chris, feel free to jump in, but they all have components of personalized learning, and really some of the main components where you've got the individualized piece when you're looking at the guided math and the guided reading, and then our buildings that have went through the CCI training, that's personalized in terms of kids are setting their own goals, tracking their own progress towards goals. And then I think the main component that we're missing is the part that we're piloting, which is that digital enhancement. So most of your schools, districts that do personalized learning, if you're going to support a teacher in really doing personalized learning, if your expectation is that, they're working with these small groups, then it becomes, and that's always been the question, what is the quality of the instruction, or what is the quality of the work that's being done in these other small groups? And having those digital tools and supports, like with Front Row, where it can say, okay, on this standard, this is where you're at, you're going to practice this, here's where you went wrong, do this again, or move on to this next level, while the teacher's over there and doing that rotation. To me, I think that's probably, between that and the ongoing CCI training, that's probably that evolution that we're on our way, but we're missing just those pieces to truly be in a personalized learning district.
So is it almost like a little bit, I got the core of it, I've moved over to this group, and now I've got I've got kind of something laid out for me on my device that I'm able to work through with my group and still continue learning and being assessed at the same time. Is that kind of the...
It's a combination of things, Kevin.
Okay.
So every student should have small group guided math, even the students who are being successful, because you should be working with them at their level. So what Front Row allows us to do is exactly what you said, though. It sets lessons for the student. You give a pre-assessment, and then it sets lessons like Brian was talking about.
Okay.
And then the teacher is actually able to know how many problems the student has completed, their success rate on the problems, the amount of time they've been on that program for the day. All of those things can be monitored on Front Row. And those are the kind of things that Forder and Oakville Elementary are going to be looking at over the next several months and helping us to determine if this is the best tool that we feel can help facilitate the personalized learning when they are not with the teacher working with them.
And that can also help the teacher in determining the groups.
Absolutely.
So in other words, instead of just, hey, table 4, come on over here, it's your turn to work with teacher, it can be, okay, this is the group, you guys are still struggling a little bit with fractions, or you guys are flying high, here's an extended lesson, an enrichment piece, whatever the case might be.
Okay.
So, but Front Row is a supplemental piece.
Yes.
It's not the piece driving everything. Right.
Okay.
There's another piece that we've seen, we all really like. We just jokingly call it penguin math because there's a little penguin.
Super cute.
But it is ridiculously expensive. And the time that it requires on a daily basis is insane.
How do you mean, for a student or for a teacher? or-
Yeah, it's like, for teacher and student, it's like, what are we gonna have to give up to get that
Okay.
much time in a day? And there's nothing that we're really willing to give up to make that sort of monetary and time investment.
So are we still kind of looking for that main one? Is that
What was the name of that program?
Front row.
penguin math?
No.
Penguin math.
Penguin is
Penguin
called
math.
STI.
Penguin?
Penguin, STI.
They use a penguin.
It's a penguin.
Oh,
So-
penguin.
Or
STI.
penguin, okay.
They use a penguin to explain the math
I was struggling with
concepts. It's called STI math.
STI.
And it's a good program. It's, you can do it on a desktop, you can do it on an iPad or whatever. It's just,
Expensive.
it's expensive and it's incredibly time. Yes.
And front row is like that, except a less powerful version.
Front row is more of a supplement piece.
But that allows for some of the personalized learning that Brian was talking about, right?
It allows more for the personalized pacing.
Pacing, okay. Yeah.
So, some of the things that we're doing well with the pacing and differentiating with that. The piece of the personalization that we don't have, I would say, is the interest-based piece. And we're not leveraging a student's interests and strengths to deliver curriculum.
Okay.
Right? We're not to that
Yeah,
piece.
voice and choice, yeah.
Is that the one, the front row, is that the one that you said was $9 a seat? Is that the software?
Yes.
$9 a kid. Yeah. Our software seat.
And then you can add ELA to that for a couple more bucks a kid if we ended up being really impressed. And
And a related question on the math, has anything been discussed about maybe having like a Saturday morning review session for students that want to get additional help in math? Any discussion about after,
Tutoring now. I mean, like at Washington, there's tutoring Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday
Oh.
by teachers after
Okay.
school.
I thought we discouraged tutoring. I was under the impression that tutoring wasn't a good way to do things.
That's just, that's as much
Student.
homework kind of help stuff that's kind of.
Homework hotspot, what they
Going on.
call it, yeah.
there's some teachers
Or get
that,
extra
Pull
help.
kids out of the classroom to tutor during the day. That's, I think, what Vicki's saying, you're
Yes.
discouraging tutoring. You're
Yes.
pulling kids out of the
Oh, yeah.
classroom to tutor during the day,
Yeah.
because then they're missing the curriculum going on in the classroom.
I thought we were discouraging students.
That's
Is that what
what I
you-
think he's thinking of.
That,
Yes.
Yeah, because you said tutoring could be used as a crutch and it wouldn't be effective. Is that what you're talking
If that
I was
was the
really
answer,
talking about
no
pulling students out
problem.
of school during the day. I thought tutoring was after school. I just assumed.
Not always.
Not
It was
always.
not.
I mean, we have some Oasis stuff going on.
Right. So.
That may have been a
that's-
misunderstanding when we had that.
That's the part I was so confused about. When you were saying the tutoring wasn't effective, I was just scratching my head going, I don't get it.
Well, the argument against tutoring is that you rely on the tutoring and you don't strengthen your core.
But I don't know that those are independent. In other words, strengthening your core is something we're doing now. The tutoring is kind of the bridge or the Band-Aid.
I can tell you what my concern is. Tutoring's fine if it's the classroom teacher that wants to stay after and work with some kids. That happens all the time. And that can be effective.
Because my understanding is PTOs pay for some of that.
Occasionally.
Yes.
Occasionally. But the example of, say, bringing in someone from the community or a retired person to work that hasn't been through, especially nowadays where we offer days and days of professional development and how we want to teach this math. I mean, the difference is my wife can sit down with my fifth grader and she knows, because she's an elementary teacher, and she knows however to show him to do division or whatever, and I sit down with him, I'm like, no, here's how you do it, you do the little thing, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's the problem. I try to teach him a different strategy, and I confuse the heck out of him, and so then I go and watch TV and call in. So that's, honestly, I'm joking, but that's really what our concern is you're not going to get that level, and you get sometimes conflicting strategies and problems, and it's more of an advantage, especially if we're going to pay money for it. It's not the best bang for the buck.
Any thought about the Saturday morning help sessions with the regular classroom teacher that's willing to come in on a Saturday for additional?
So,
Good luck getting your kids there on a Saturday morning with all their extracurriculars.
that's where I'm going.
What?
Anytime, I don't know why, I always think of this stupid commercial.
Same
And it
difference.
was a tennis shoe commercial, and it was, some crazy dude there. It's a film crew, and he's got big spiky hair and crazy clothes, and he's talking about, they had somebody coming to this basketball court and do this crazy dunk, and blah, 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 just an unbelievable thing. And then he gets right in the camera and he's like, but the dude didn't show up. Right? So you got to get people there. And when I look at the schedules of our kids on the weekends,
Thank you,
I mean,
CNC
it's
Sports.
soccer, T-ball, and football. I mean, it's just,
And the teachers have the same demands with their families as well.
Right, and then you've got,
it's one of
yeah.
those, they're, yeah. So that, capturing some of the after-school time that we're kind of doing already, I think I'm comfortable with the things that we've got in place and where we're headed. And I think we'll see results of that. One of the things that everybody always kind of worries about, though, is kind of a first little bit of an implementation dip before things really get kind of rolling. But I'm pretty comfortable with where things are going. With all the things that we've kind of already started down the path of it. We had another meeting yesterday talking about CCI and structure and that, and kind of how far our 4 buildings have come relative to that. We're about to have 3 more start that next year. Actually, they were planning their first look at it, and when that's going to happen. So we're starting to get the flywheel moving, and that's just, we got to get it cranked up to speed. And I think that's just going to take us a little bit longer.
I know you're kind of targeting 3 to 5% improvement on the math scores for next year. That's kind of what you had said. Am I correct?
It's a different benchmark. When you said what would be a realistic percent, and I said that would be more realistic. That is not in our strategic plan specifically.
Oh, I thought you told me that's the target, that you're looking for 3 to 5% improvement in those, what you call MPI scores or something.
No, it was
This is what you could expect.
right,
She didn't sign anything and it wasn't.
No, but
Our leading indicators will be our next set of benchmark assessments.
Right.
Which is what I was getting ready to ask
That's
about.
gonna be the first piece, to see kind of how we're going, and we'll have the third benchmark. We'll also have the fifth grade math assessment. So those are kind of the leading, we'll have that data way before.
The map.
It's going to be October, November before we have map data.
Correct. That's the
Wouldn't
problem.
the whole purpose of map testing going online is so we could have results right away?
That's
That worked out well.
the intent.
It's a great question.
So before the start of next year, to go back to Vicky's question, I mean, we'll review the strategic plan, and obviously there's going to be additional math pieces in there. And so at that point, we'll set those goals and those indicators, and those will be shared with the board.
Because I think one of the questions I asked someone is if the 3 to 5% is what I remember, that doesn't necessarily translate into the proficient and advanced. In other words, if we were 47, 48% proficient and advanced, that doesn't necessarily translate to 5 additional points of proficient and advanced. The two are unrelated.
Right.
You're talking about MPI.
Right.
Right,
MPI and proficient and
And
advanced.
proficient are unrelated. The 3 to 5% doesn't.
They are, but
They're linked.
but they're,
They're
Right.
linked,
But
but
they're
they're not
They're called.
specifically dependent
exactly.
on one another. I mean, it's
It's not a direct function.
It's not a direct, yeah. linear-
Because you could
it's not a
have an
linear
incre-
function.
it is not a linear function
Right.
at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Not a linear.
I know you kind of explained a little bit about the scores.
Because you could have an increase in proficient and advanced, and you could have an increase in the number of kids going from basic to below basic, and your MPI would go down.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So
Right.
your proficient and advanced score percent could go up, but if you have some other things that go, another,
You could have students falling from basic to below basic.
and what our APR is based on is that MPI,
Okay.
that MAP Performance Index, not just straight proficient and advanced anymore like it used to be.
Okay.
So we'll have to decide if that is the best
Right.
assessment, that we want to utilize that, or, you know, for instance, with the language arts, you know, we didn't use the MAP test, we've used different indicators.
You'll have some ability to predict based on those tests that you're giving now, what the test might turn out to be for the MAP scores when they're taken, right? You'll have some predictive ability. That's what you know.
then we'll worry about it.
Changes.
He likes his predictions.
Text changes.
The test is, yeah.
No, but you're giving assessments to see where you're at, but that test should be aligned to the.
But remember that the standards have changed.
Right.
Unfortunately, our assessment aligns to the standards, yes,
Right.
which we will give that this year. But then with the new standards and the new assessment,
That'll happen in April, that's different.
that'll happen next year. It's, yeah.
But
So
we-
that's
we
where.
hope for correlation.
Yes, yes, but to answer the question, yes. So right now, when we're looking, I think the benchmark data from the MAP assessment, from the math assessment, not MAP, from the math assessment that we gave, what the benchmark we gave in November, and then we get our second one in February that we talked about, we would share that update with the board after that benchmark. That'll show us some data about how our students are progressing towards meeting the standards. And those align to the standards-based grading that we do at elementary as well.
I think it's important to just kind of recognize that within whatever the overall number is, that if we look at elementary and middle school, the numbers there, proficient and advanced, however you want to measure it, are lower than high school. High school numbers are typically pretty good.
Yes.
And that really stems from the notion that for elementary, there are so many standards. So it's kind of like saying, hey, we're going to have a test over all those books over there. The high school is more like, hey, we're going to have a test over the books in that shelf. So the target is much clearer.
In high school, interesting, okay.
For the high school. Plus, we have a little bit of control over who takes the assessment or not. Because we can say that you've not completed the material to take this test and shown us that you're proficient before we let you.
In high school, you can.
In high school.
But you can't do that in elementary.
You can do that in elementary. It's a
Did not know
grade
that.
level test at elementary. At high school, it's a subject level test, and we can tell a kid
Yeah.
when you're ready to take the subject level test.
Okay, I did not know that, all right.
And with our social studies, didn't only like 80 kids take that test?
That was because of a
Because we switched the
Course
course sequence.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So there's,
Yeah, so when you're
They're the
waiting on
same.
80 kids to give you a score.
I know a district, they had the same anomaly one year. 100% of their kids scored proficient in advance on the social studies class. I mean, they're like, yoo-hoo, you did real good.
3 kids take it?
One kid. Because they had changed their course sequence, and
Right.
so only one kid had to take it.
There's nowhere to go but down.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you didn't like that kid, you guess you stopped him from taking it.
But every kid has got to take 4 before they graduate high school.
For something.
4 specific.
For specific, that's okay.
that's how you assess your core. But do we not have any, is there not a correlation relative to where we are in with our high school scores right now, or performance, relative to our elementary and our middle school, where we have areas where we have concern? Are we not concerned that we're not going to be caught up enough that now our high school scores are also going to drop? Or not be where we want them? Because they didn't really drop because it was actually higher one state standard 1 year to the next or whatever, but
The high school test, that's the one that hasn't changed.
okay.
It's stayed steady. And for whatever reason, if you look at math test scores statewide, you will see elementary, middle school, high school. That's just what you see across the state.
One would question the test, but yes.
But it's because the high school is such a more clear target. It's such a narrower, it's an end of course exam. So it's an Algebra 1 exam. It's not a math exam. It's a biology exam. It's not a science exam. So that there are fewer standards. So yes, the notion of cumulative
Foundational knowledge built upon
Yeah.
Right.
each year, you would think that that would correlate to, I have this
Or
much
high
math
school.
knowledge whenever I graduate from high school, not I have this much knowledge about Algebra 1.
Especially
which is kind of the argument for an early investment.
I can look at many arguments, but yes. Okay. Okay.
So I think, at least what I've heard, is based upon the early success you've seen with guided math, and the use of what Discover as a major vendor that's turned out to be a pretty good source for another alternative. And what you were talking about with Front Row, and I assume that's one of many little capture and report, and the fact that you've moved up the curriculum, we're going to try and push that up. And then based upon, and Brian gave a pretty good insight that, yeah, you could put people in the classroom, but it's a disruptive element of it. In other words, if I pull 10 really good people out, there's a backlash, there's a churn, and from what you've told me, at least, and I'm reading into what you said, Brian, that you have confidence that the steps you're taking now would have the same effect of trying to put 10 math specialists into one in each building. That's what I hear.
I think it's a better approach.
Seems as though there's greater consistency.
Building
which
a
is-
core too.
Which is really valuable, I think, in the classroom.
Yeah,
Teacher's
I mean,
perspective.
it's gonna provide model classrooms in every elementary and middle school, is what this model will provide.
Can I ask a question about our math structure? So where we've got math teachers in elementary and middle school, is there a level before U3 that is kind of looking at and how we're doing, and are we following, especially as we're doing so much PD, are we following in all the classrooms what it is that we're learning and what we're trying to implement across everything? You kind of said it before about implementation, and I know when you get into changing things, implementation is the part where everything dies, and you're trying to do it across 10 elementary schools with multiple teachers in multiple classrooms, and this isn't a slam on teachers at all, but everybody's different, everybody handles change different, and some teachers may not naturally take to some of these things. So I'm just kind of wondering from an implementation point, is there a structure or a layer that exists there If there's not, do you think it's something that we should look at?
Well, I think two things. One is the STEM leader core and the math leader core, but its application. You had to want to give something a try, want to do that.
Apply and chosen?
Yes,
Okay.
apply and be chosen. So in that respect, there's a little bit of self-accountability.
Okay.
But when we meet, especially with the elementary principals, we've got a group, a group of schools working on this and a group of schools working on this. And we take those principles and break them out and have conversations around the specific pieces that they're implementing and what classroom observations look like. So we've also changed up the way we do those meetings. Now we do those in buildings. So when we're in that building, part of our meeting is now walkthroughs where we're looking for those specific things. So it's 20 people are walking around the building looking for specific stuff.
Okay. That's excellent.
It's a big part of the principal's job, and the principal's, part of our expectations of them, and part of Tina's expectations, is they attend all the professional development with their teachers.
Okay.
So they know what they're looking for instance, Lucy Calkins, they know what they're looking for when they go into those rooms, and that's what they're holding them accountable for, so.
That's great, because part of that's even just coaching.
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily that you get on people right away.
No.
It's might be difficulty in figuring out how to do some of those concepts.
But then there's also this kind of new teacher evaluation model too with educator growth plans, and a lot of those growth plans are around math. So, I mean,
Okay.
there's just a lot of that kind of coming together. Now we do all of that electronically too. We can
Sorry.
I mean, all of that's kind of new to us too, but as we kind of get into that a little bit, we can see some of those things where, that we have a large number of people who are really proficient at one thing, or, are we showing some deficiencies across the board in a particular area, or maybe not deficiencies, but, just a little bit lower perhaps.
Using data and metrics to target in a little bit.
And with us going to the electronic evaluation system this year, principals are able to pull data on, they instantly can look at data on different measures that we've indicated. Depth of knowledge is one of the indicators, and student engagement, and they can pull reports on data on specific teachers and look at that as part of the evaluation. And all teachers, no matter if they are tenured or non-tenured, have 10 evaluations conducted by their principal every school year. That's something we started last year. And we've done extensive training over the last couple of years with Dr. Patty Corum on observations, on coaching and observations, and actually our department chairs have gone through that training as well. So there's more eyes in the classroom. And elementary teachers, we have 20 elementary teachers that are starting that training on Monday with Patty Corum as well. So we'll have 2 elementary teachers trained at every building. So that goes along with helping to have eyes in the classroom and see things.
Feedback, coaching.
Yeah, and then with Discovery Ed, they actually provide specific administrator training, and they do building walks with administrators to help them know what to look for in the classroom when they're out doing observations on the things they've been training teachers on. So there's all those components that tie together that are going to help support, because we obviously can't be everywhere like we'd like to be.
Right. Does that all kind of tie in with a CCI type of program as well?
It does, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And like Chris was saying, by next year, we'll have 7 of our elementaries will be on board by next year, because we're adding 3 more schools next year.
I'll just say I'm encouraged by everything you guys are doing.
That's a three-year
Three-year rollout,
commitment
yeah.
on the CCI.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So everything is very much interconnected and related and moving along the same path. We've just got some that are moving along that path a little bit ahead of others.
Yeah.
Did you say each classroom teacher is evaluated 10 times, whether they're tenured or not?
Yes.
That changed then, didn't it?
Yes,
It
2
used to
years
be-
ago.
Okay, because it used to be like maybe 3 times for tenured and a few more for non-tenured or something?
And those are formal evaluations, obviously.
These are.
Principals are always popping in for 3-5 minutes all throughout the day, and those don't count towards the 10,
Oh,
so.
and you're talking about elementary teachers or across the district?
Across the district,
Across the district.
all teachers.
And do the building principals also attend the professional development, like you meant, like you sit in on the professional development for Lucy Calkins and math, and the building principals sit in on those too?
All of our elementary.
Okay.
That way they know what to expect that the teacher should be.
Right. Do they have enough hours in a day to do all this? It just seems like there's a.
Well, a lot of it's in the summer. I mean, they're going during the summer, just like teachers are. I mean, you know, they're going, like, yesterday, for example, every principal is assigned to a specific grade level. So they go and they sit through training at whatever grade level they're assigned to. So we have principals divided out in buildings. So they're not at every grade level, but they get to see at least one grade level, and they work with that grade level, so they're getting to see the training though.
But it sounds like, and a part of this whole thing was the resources that we have and where are we lacking and things like that. And, you know, we're not here on a daily basis, so we don't see what you guys are doing daily in the buildings and everything else. I don't think you guys want us around all the time. So being able to hear how you guys are utilizing all of our principals, all of our teachers, and the training, and that was kind of the purpose of the meeting, was to hear how these resources are being utilized throughout the district, not just financially, but also our staff. You know, I knew, because I had talked to a principal before, that you guys had gone to the 10 times a year. And that's a lot, especially knowing that we're already on the very, very light side of making sure we have enough people in place that are supposed to be there. Because we also know that, you know, if you say we're going to hire an administrator, everybody's like, they make too much money. So we don't want to have that conversation. But in essence, we really, I mean, when we look at what they do, you can see, right, you can see what
the need for an
what the
administrator
need
is,
of those
right.
type, you know, those positions are, and why you can quickly see why something would be lacking in an area if something's not getting done based upon not having enough staff. So I appreciate that.
So is there a question you have in that, wanting to get into, to explore a little bit, or?
No, I mean, going based upon the questions that we talked about today, and the responses that I think you guys have a pretty good feel based upon what you're looking for, what you kind of want to do, and a lot of that is just going to be, you know, as this next year goes through the summer and everything else, to kind of implement and put people in place where they need to be. And I think that's the biggest thing that I know, and again, I could be speaking strictly for myself, but I think we're very supportive of if you guys feel that, you know, we need to add a position or we need to do something like that. We want to make sure, I mean, you know, everybody always wants to talk about our finances and how, you know, we're going to be broke tomorrow is always kind of the theme that we feel around here. In essence, if you really look at our finances, we're not in bad shape. Hiring a few people, if we need to hire a few people to effectively teach our kids and do what we need to do, there has to be a better understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. So.
And if we look at the data around our administrators per building or per child, or children per administrator, we're lower than just about everybody around us. I pulled those numbers a year and a half ago, and you guys know it, right?
They feel it.
Yeah, you live it.
I suspect if you looked at neighboring districts in their elementary schools, I suspect you'd find an assistant and or head principal and an assistant at every school. I mean, I don't know, I didn't look.
John's done the data. We requested the data last year whenever we were talking about this. We have that in a PowerPoint somewhere.
I suspect we're one of the few
It's been posted.
districts that have just one head elementary principal and no assistants at some of our schools.
Right, or head principal and a.
Part-time assistant
Half.
that splits between
Right.
schools.
We realize we only have one school with a full-time assistant, elementary.
Right, and that's because that school's got 600-something kids, so. 623.
Beer bong.
Thank you, Jeff.
And even at the high school levels too. I think if you look at other area high schools, and again, I didn't look, but I suspect you would find a head principal and 4 assistants, 1 for each grade level.
But, I mean, really, you know, if we look across and, you know, kind of look at enrollment and kind of pinpoint what our principal needs are, you know, we're roughly 2.5 principals short across K-12.
Right, but it's probably even worse than that because you're looking at averages.
Well, that's MSIP minimum standard.
Minimum, okay.
Right, and so that looks at each individual building.
Oh, okay.
And says, okay, you know, should this building have another half, should this building have a less a half? Kind of deal.
And it used to be that you get dinged on your report if you had more than 500 kids and not an assistant, or has that changed?
What you did, at one point, you did catch a little heat.
Right.
If you were off on your staffing.
Okay, and that's not the case anymore with the new standards?
With MSIP 4 and MSIP 5, they've pretty much moved to a model of if your APR is good, then everything else probably is okay. So they don't dig into those things the way they used to long time ago.
Because those are conversations I've had with parents when people ask, why does one school have an assistant and one doesn't? Well, one might have 500, Blades had 501 students at one point. That's why they had an assistant.
There's a standard for superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, librarians, counselors.
And those aren't exactly high numbers. Those aren't generous either.
Well, and I was just saying, there are standards, and then there are also best practices.
Yes,
I mean,
right,
you think about
exactly.
what goes into either a teacher's day or a principal's day or an assistant principal. I mean, many days are started at 7 o'clock in the morning with a variety of meetings, whether it's a staff meeting or a faculty meeting or IEP meetings or meetings with parents or what, and goes until well after students left the building. And the multitude of things that they do during that day, I think many people don't understand what goes into being a principal these days, and how many ways they're pulled into the classroom to substitute because there were no subs today.
Right.
There's a great deal of flexibility and chameleonness that has to go into, I think, being a principal or assistant principal. Or
And even when you talk about the counselors, you talk about the librarians like we saw up in Kansas City. We saw a librarian that had to deal in the analog, the digital, and the creative technology world. It's an entirely different scope of things. I think that's one of the things we kind of dismiss is how complicated and how systemic these jobs are, the crossover between the traditional and what we've grown into.
So when you said had to get an assistant because they went to 501, I'm thinking, wow, they didn't have one before.
No, they didn't.
That's a lot of kids.
Right.
And there's a lot of need there. And all the staff and the teachers that go into that model, I don't believe that we are overpopulated in those areas.
That certainly wasn't my point. I was trying to say the MSIP standards.
We're fortunate that we have such committed
We need to start hiring twins and triplets.
principals now.
I was saying the MSIP standards aren't exactly generous, meaning the MSIP for like fourth and fifth grade is 27. They allow 27 in a classroom. That's a lot. That's not generous.
There's minimum standard and there's desirable standard.
Right.
So when we looked at administrative numbers, we just looked at the minimum number. I mean, we're nowhere close to that.
Right. That's a dream, right.
Oh, yeah.
It's an argument with class size.
Okay, I think we had gone through, I mean, I don't feel like we need to touch base on every single thing that we had got our questions answered and things like that. Jamie, I know we said that we would talk about block scheduling, the cost in that, the amount of teachers it takes and all of that, so I will let you start.
I mean, my question on block scheduling was simply, and it comes down to, the conversation never started around saving money, but the question that arises when we talk about it is, you're talking $2 million, is that the best investment that we can make with those dollars? Now, the conversation earlier, going to the flex model, is the desire, how does the flex model, I guess, work in the sense, I mean, we're trying to do design your own high school experience and all of these things. But what I really want to make sure that is that price tag the absolute best investment that we can make? Just because we like something and because it's how we've always done it or how we've done it for the last 20 years doesn't mean it's the best investment. And is this the best way to get the most bang for our buck when it comes to student achievement? And that's what I'm having a hard time with when we look at that price tag is, you can pull that money out and reinvest it. You can reinvest it in 32 teaching aids. Now, if that's not the direction we want to go, if there's a penguin math thing that we want to invest, I mean, that's a lot of money to invest in our students. So the question that I have which I was not sold on the other day, was why are we spending $2 million here instead of really investing it in student achievement somewhere else? And the answer I got was, because we like it and students will educate, learn better in this because they like it. Well, that's fine, but 4 years from now, students who have never experienced block scheduling won't know any better to like it or not. So once again, is this the best model? And is the flex model where we're going also worth the additional money to keep it? And that's my heartache, is really bang for the buck.
What would the flex are we looking at any difference in staffing when it goes to a flex model?
That's my question too.
So, at least to me, we have some level of control over what staffing is
Okay.
at any building, right? So, I think one of the things that we learned from taking a look at the high school schedule is that the money is not in block scheduling itself,
Right.
in and of itself.
The breaks.
The money is in plan time and tapping. That's where the money is. So then it's, do you value that time? So there are people who do, and there are people that are a little more skeptical of the time and how that time is being used. I will say, in the transition from where we are today to the flex model, the TAP and A&P time will be going down.
Okay.
So it makes a small drop next year, and then it makes another drop into the flex model. But there's still plenty of TAP and A&P time. So when we look at schedules across the region that are block scheduling or a hybrid or something else, there are a lot of schools that have something TAP and A&P like. They may call it advisory or whatever. If they have that now, we just commit more time to that than anybody else that we've seen. I mean, like substantially more in our current model.
Right.
So our flex piece will get to less.
How much less?
So right now, if I remember correct, well, I know right now, on average, it's 225 minutes a week.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I think when we get to the flex mod schedule, it's going to be more like 120, 150.
And how much more is that than who else, the other districts that we'd compare to? I mean, that's significantly an improvement. I mean, is that?
Well, so.
Because that also equates to that much more time, teacher contact time and things like that, because you're converting that time into something else, right? So you're putting kids back in the class instead of having a study hall, which is essentially what A&P is. Let's just call it study hall. So instead of having a study hall, you're now in a classroom in front of a teacher learning.
I think at the 120 will still be about probably 20 to 30 minutes a week, probably at some of the highest.
Okay.
But I will say, in that district in particular, their instructional day is like 21 minutes longer than ours is.
Which makes a huge difference
So,
too.
That's 10 days.
Yes.
That's 10 days.
10 days.
I know this.
No, we haven't heard this over the past 3 years.
5 minutes is 2 days.
Haven't heard this. Yeah. So it's fun facts that you have committed
That
to
are
your
just
brain.
floating around up here.
It's a ton of time.
Yes, it is.
If they have more than we have. But so a lot of people are doing the TAP and A&P kind of piece. We've just committed more time to it. So is it a good investment? Something like that probably is. Have we used it as good as we could have? I would say our utilization of it has probably waned a little bit over time, perhaps. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some kids who utilize that time to no end. There are other kids, not so much, right?
As my son calls it, It's his chill-out time.
Yeah, non-structured time isn't the right
2 to 3
time,
times a
isn't
week.
right for every student.
Oh yeah, I run around with a
They
group
are
of
not
guys that
being
graduated
utilized.
in 2004, 2005. They're like, yeah, we learned to play poker in that time.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this is a great investment, guys. I mean,
Right, so I'd like to keep it a little bit,
right.
but it wouldn't entirely bother me to take some resources out of high school and maybe middle schools and shift those lower.
Right, and that's
But, I mean, and those are FTE numbers that we've just kind of got to figure out as we evolve to what we are, as we transition to what we'll do next year and then on to the flex and what that's going to take. Because the other thing that we kind of need to get moving on to in the next few weeks is a conversation about middle school as well. Because we're doing a ton of stuff in elementary. We're doing a ton of stuff in high school. We're doing some really neat STEM stuff in the middle school, but we've not yet had a deep conversation around middle school structure. So are there things at the middle school that we can maybe gain to?
Similar scenario, teachers teach 5 classes out of 7 blocks in the middle school,
Yes.
right? So that's,
I mean, so yes, we have.
it's a similar scenario as high school where they don't,
Yeah, I
not
mean-
quite as much as 5 out of 8, but yeah.
I mean, I guess my dream world is, kids in front of teachers more often.
Yes.
For longer periods of time.
Yes.
I feel agree with that. And then making sure that we utilize all the time that we have them to the best of our ability and all the dollars that we have, putting them in the classroom and getting the best bang for our buck. So as we move to flex, we'll save, or at least be able to move, ideally, some of the FTE, hopefully,
To another initiative.
to other
Right.
purposes.
Where do we?
In order to essentially reinvesting that money back in student achievement.
Flexible resources.
Yes.
Because we're not going to moving, and this is where like I bang my head against the wall, where I really have heartburn on this specific issue. It's because it's not like we're investing $2 million or whatever the FTE is in improving anything. Because there's another model that we can essentially get statistically the exact same achievement out of for $2 million less. So that then begs the question of why are we making this investment here? And and why is it worth that investment when we can actually get some bang for our buck somewhere else? So, and I understand with the flex model, and that's really, even when we started this conversation, I was intrigued by the hybrid model. Not for the money saving aspect. In fact, up until this conversation, I wasn't totally convinced that a flex model was going to save us any, or at least free up any resources to move. But because it put kids in front of teachers more often and gave the district some more ability to do more of the designer piece of education. And as Dr. Dorsey always says, kind of transition you into what a college model is going to look like and how to utilize your time. So that's always been appealing, but.
So I'm with you.
Okay.
So, but it's not, for me, it's not just about the schedule change.
Right.
It's about how are kids going to come and go, and how many kids are going to take more stuff virtually under a design your own high school model. Plus, we're embedding the virtual piece into the high school. Plus, we've got the early college piece. Plus, we've got trying to expand CAPS. So how do all of those pieces impact where our kids are going and the staffing around that?
And, yeah.
Lots of moving parts.
Oh, and education is
And
going to change in the
redistricting
next
is
4
going to
years.
move people too, so we've got that whole piece.
Well, and I think, Jamie and I kind of felt the same way. I appreciate when somebody talks about, we heard it a lot through cuts. Why we shouldn't cut block scheduling. One of the big things was, well, we get to practice this, or we can do this, or this, or this. And while I appreciate the fact that our kids are generous enough to want to go out and raise money for an awareness or something like that, but they showcase it around, well, I did this during AMP and I didn't waste any of my time that it would have taken out of other classes. Well, if we want to say that AMP is actual instructional time, you can't be practicing something because your other sports can't be practicing during AMP. I better not hear that ever. So, we have certain things that practice during this time. We have others that are out on the track raising money. And again, I appreciate the fact that they do that. But is that the best use of our resources when we've got other initiatives across the district that we could be utilizing them in? And that's a hard part. And it's not that I want to take anything from our high schools. I want to make sure our high schools have exactly what they need. These kids are going to be moving on to college. We need to make sure they're ready. But I don't know that certain things, this amount of free time, and I'm going to refer to it as free time because if you're not in your tiered AMP, it is free time. So you can utilize that how you want, whether you are one of those kids that utilizes it exactly for what it was meant for, which is going and seeing teachers, getting help, or if you're my son who utilizes it for his chill out time.
But you realize there are AMP days where they're not allowed to travel. It's not universally true that they can go anytime they want.
It's based upon what AMP or TAP
It
they're in.
depends where they are in the week.
So, two buildings do it a little bit differently. But here, for most of the time, they're stuck in whatever room for about the first third, the first half. And then they have the ability to travel.
Well, I'm encouraged, just like Jamie just mentioned a minute ago, with regard to, I didn't correlate the flex model second year phase with any possibility of reinvesting that funding elsewhere for other initiatives. We've talked about math extensively the last 3 meetings that we've had, and lots of opportunities with regard to that and ELA, et cetera. Perhaps that winds up being a progressive need in the district where we have the flexibility around FTEs or that funding in order to be able to utilize those resources elsewhere. I thought when we went to this new phase 1, phase 2 model, it was the $2 million price tag period. So I'm really encouraged I like the idea of the flex schedule for the reasons that I've already voiced, but I also like it because it sounds like there's possibility to continue to revisit how we are allocating those resources based on the number of variables that we have up in the air at any given time right now, and where we need to move money and resources.
I squeak when I walk, so anytime somebody leaves or whatever, I'm looking at, do we have to replace that
Where
as
and how?
is? Can we move? Can we do whatever? So in the next, probably based on conversations that we've had internally in the last 2 days, and we're going to be seeing some positions leave through attrition that we're going to be able to do some things with, but we're also losing some kind of key positions that we got to spend some time making sure we get good people in.
Well, I think it is good to keep some of that time for the students. I think that there are students who use that for student development time, and there are others who are just going to stare at the wall and learn how to play poker or whatever might be their choice of activity during that time. Being a student who utilized my study halls well, and for those students who take AP credits and et cetera, they have a lot of workload, and having that extra piece to be able to touch base at school with the appropriate personnel is great, because they still probably have homework. But we do want to have a model that encourages good use of time to the best of our abilities. We can't make students do certain things, and I have a son who would do the exact same thing and blow that time off instead of being productive. Not that he's been encouraged to do that, so I do think we need to continue, and I think the students identify that that's really valuable to them. So I get that. We are all overscheduled, we're having that extra time. So, but the level that we have seems a lot to me, but I don't have anybody in high school yet. I haven't had to manage it. But I like the flexibility of resource piece. I think that is very encouraging, and I did not have that impression before. So that's a bonus.
That's a possibility then, when you go to more of a flex schedule, that you will save some positions, may not be $2 million worth, but you'll save some positions.
Or reallocate.
I mean, essentially what we have the option to do.
I'm not looking to cut FTE across the district.
Right. It's just
I'm looking at, can we hold FTE fairly constant, maybe up one or two.
Plus or minus, yeah.
And move people in a way that we believe is a little bit more effective in how we're allocating our human capital.
Yeah.
Not that you were looking to get rid of the FTE, but I meant if we go to like next year's schedule will require roughly the same number of teachers, right, at the high school? Just incorporating a few C days.
But we'll still be looking at attrition and whether or not we're going to replace people. But we also look at stuff like, you know, how much interest is there in a particular class? And, you know, are we getting rid of a class that only has 3 kids in it?
Yeah, right,
You know,
yeah.
I would hope there's not anything like that, because if one class has 3, then some other class has 30.
But then it's, you know, and then there's also.
Or they don't,
When you're in
because
high
there's no
school, you're in
interest in this
subjects.
course,
But
this
there's
topic.
also programmatic changes too, right? So if there's no interest in a particular program anymore, then you keep having it
yeah,
just
right, no,
because.
Right.
Right, because we always have.
I mean, yeah.
So-
Terrible.
You have a lot of flexibility in that FTE picture, particularly at the high school. And yeah, we know we're not going to let a class go with 3, but if it's an AP class or a PLTW class, and maybe it's their capstone project for PLTW, and it's 12
Right.
kids,
That's,
I think
you know what, we're
right.
probably
I think
going to
you
let that go,
Yes.
because it's that important
Yes.
right,
to
appropriate
get them
ratio
ready
for
for
that type of
engineering
learning.
school. So that would be an example of, hey, well, we can allocate this over here, and yeah, maybe this other class over here, or maybe wood shop has gone a different direction, and we're not going to offer that, you know, whatever the case might be, so.
But when,
And if we can offer alternative PE credits, do we need so many PE teachers? You know, so it's all of those things and how they, you know, but that's not a next year thing. That's a, how do we evolve going down the road? So it's, how can we staff to offer the programming that we want to offer in our high schools, but also shift resources to the lower levels that in large part have taken a run of hits over time.
but by itself, the flex schedule doesn't save positions. That's what you're trying to say. Or
No, if you're just swapping
it-
one for one, yeah, you're
No,
not necessarily.
but the
good.
goal in the end is
Right.
if you're going to offer different, you only offer a 50-minute study hall instead of the 85 or whatever we have now.
Then
I mean,
you would save
that's
positions
the
if you
end
could
goal.
if you could do that.
Yeah. And the last,
You move down, so one of the challenges you're gonna have with the flex schedule is some level of equity in playing time.
right.
So that's going to be, I see that as one of the big challenges in what that's going to look like. But it's hard to say what personnel changes exactly. And we had this conversation today, you know, we thought we could probably, across the district, potentially pick off 4 to 6 positions fairly easily. But part of that is, you know, redistricting. Because if redistricting works in, you know, some sort of a logical manner to balance enrollment between the 2 high schools in particular, then in theory, that's going to move kids from Melville to in theory. That's also going to move staff. You know, if we're moving 150 kids, we're going to have to move some staff too. So we got that piece kind of coming into play as well. So, but, I mean, yeah, I think we'll be able to.
That sounds good. Yeah, and when I talk about saving $2 million, I'm the last person that wants to see our reserves rise anymore. I vote against that every time. So yeah, I want to reinvest.
Right.
That's
Right.
the goal
Right,
here.
right,
It's
right.
Yeah,
utilize
it's
that
not about
resource for
saving money.
no.
You're gonna have to get in line on that one.
So, from a reinvesting standpoint.
Utilizing it effectively.
So
Yeah, I
he's
mean,
not-
just
Yeah.
He's not
being
listening back there, but Wolf was
Oh,
giving me
he is
grief.
now.
Wolf was giving me grief today about, oh my God, you just went connection fit last year over people turning off their light switches. I'm like, what is up with that? He's like, we saved $164,000, so, you know, or our electric bill. So Paul back here, he's been having a connection fit over the amount of toner we use. So we track toner. So first semester this year, first semester last year, our toner bill is down $12,000. So, you know, utilities, so we're doing all of this other things too So we're not just shifting personnel resources, we're trying to find these other efficiencies so we can take those resources and put them in places too.
So people atone for themselves. That's good.
Yeah.
Nice, Larry.
They fixed that at SLU, they just took all of our printers away.
Yeah, that's
Gone.
He's got like the leaderboard
Really?
on who prints the most.
Oh, we had that too. We had, yes, we had.
The wall of shame.
Yeah. They don't
But
print
it's
anymore.
pushed stuff to the print shop where it's cheaper to print.
And it's the peach jar or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yes, the people either love or hate.
Capacity to use it.
Okay.
So, okay. Jamie, you good? I like that you guys are taking a focus on all of that.
I agree.
That is so much more of a comfort level for me, going in the direction that we are. So that, I'm good with that. Is there any other topics anybody wants to talk about? I know we have the information for CSOI. Does anybody have financial type questions? Because we have it in our next meeting, so I don't want to get into a huge thing about that, but if you have financial questions, whether it be staffing, reoccurring cost, one-time cost, let's stick with just numbers opposed to feelings one way or another.
I thought it was significant. There were comments in there about the ability to look at, I'm not going to use the word absorbing, but by shifting some things around to be able to cover the recurring costs for CSOI.
Not all of them.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, we could.
But it put us, but what it does put,
Hence
it
this
puts
coming
us in the
from the guy that
ballpark.
squeaks.
Yeah, yeah. But, I mean, the budget that we have is based on shifting around 6 FTE, roughly 6 FTE, and bringing on about the rest of it. So that is the budget. I mean, that's in there.
And where would the other 6 positions come from that you'd be?
So,
or is that 6 that you?
So, in terms of teaching positions, I'm gonna be off here. It's either 11 or 13. So we think we can shift resources internally fairly easily to get half of it.
Okay.
So, which means adding the other half.
When you say shift resources, do you mean through redistricting you will need 6 less teachers?
No, no. But through redistricting, we believe that we can eliminate some instructional aid positions. So 2 instructional aides is the cost of 1 teacher. So we got that piece. There's some programmatic things that we've been at, and then through attrition and whether or not we replace, we think we can just shift around about half of them and then add the other half. And if I really got ornery, I think I could probably do all of them, but that would be a little more.
And as far as the administrator, you meant I think you'd indicated the alt schools, you want to fold them back in to each individual high school, so you no longer need that position.
Correct. That was the original thing that we laid out.
Right.
But, and then especially after a conversation that we had today around the early college stuff, that notion of a special programs person is something that we're kind of attracted to kind of coordinate all the virtual stuff that we've got going on, kind of the expansion of that, take some of the guidance and counseling stuff off of Jeff, and then wrap in a lot of those innovative pieces that we've got going on to kind of be the coordinator and liaison for all of those things.
So specifically, the alt position might go away, but then we'd be adding a position to do exactly what you just described.
I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of that depends on...
Reinvesting.
Reinvesting.
A lot of that depends on the board's decision around St. John and, Choice School of Innovation, kind of all of that.
Because if that's a shift from one position to another, then the choice school would be adding an administrator.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and
We would look at it as adding a director of special programs, not a principal.
Right, right,
Yeah,
but your salaries are going to be comparable in terms of your costs.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
So said another way, I know there was a figure that the finance committee looked at to look at the erosion of our surplus. What you're saying would probably be about half of that?
No.
Less than half.
That
That'd be-
number's on.
It was already that way.
It was
when
already
they got it.
incorporated into
Yeah.
what they
Okay.
saw.
That was in those assumptions.
Essentially, it's a
So we
half
can
million
cut
a
it
year,
down,
right?
And we can cut it down if we grab more FTEs internally. I mean, that's how you cut the number down.
It was less than 500,000 recurring to start out, but it grows every year because of increases, and it's so roughly a 500,000.
I think it gets to, in 5 years, it gets to a half, is what it was. Yeah, it starts like around
In project
450 and
management,
then up to
round to the
5.
nearest 100,000.
Round up.
Plus or minus 100,000, you know.
Well, and even
Pretty soon we're talking
during the
about-
finance committee meeting, I mean, you know, they started the conversation before we even started numbers, and it was, okay, throw out a one-time cost that you're comfortable with. And the first number that was thrown out was $1 million. Okay? If you can hand me $1 million right now and say, do what you want with it,
I don't think so.
I'm going to have to tend to believe that there is, that takes care of 2 years already, that you could put towards a school just by the reoccurring cost that goes with it. So I also look at, you know, again, we were 900,000 more positive this year than we predicted. And if we look at the trends across the district and every year, we always seem to be in that positive, more than a negative, which is a good thing, depending on who you're talking to, based upon if they believe we have too much money or not that we're sitting on with reserves. So, go ahead. I know you got something.
Yeah, I guess I kind of got two questions. One of them is, I think you've already looked at this, but would our potential alternative be to choose, while we're doing redistricting, one of the existing schools so that we don't increase FTEs at the elementary level, but one of the schools becomes, and we basically, I get the whole culture thing, so it wouldn't be taking the existing there. I mean, it would mean moving all the people that have been selected for this to that school, and then redistricting.
Right.
So it's
Around.
because my understanding is redistricting 85% capacity across all of our 10 schools equals 150% capacity remaining. Fill that with the Chris Choice School. I may be missing it, never mind. What are we doing with
Yes.
So to Kevin's question, that's a good
So,
question.
in the aggregate, your
Okay.
number is kind of right.
Okay.
Sorry. But the capacity numbers are based on crazy high class sizes.
Okay.
So that's kind of.
Then it's wrong.
Beating part of that. The other thing that's not included in that is the classrooms that we have set aside for early childhood.
Okay.
So that's a piece that you have to take out. So we've looked at that, and is that feasible? So could you do that, right? So your natural, the natural tendency is to go, well, Hagen is the low, let's just do it at Hagen, right?
That was my natural tendency, and I was told
Right.
that didn't work.
So then, if that's now a school of choice and it's not a neighborhood school, that's a lot of kids.
Because it can't
There's
be
no
both.
elementary school close
It can't be both,
because,
right? There's not enough room for it to be both.
right.
Shift from the trot
Can't
line,
be a
you gotta
school
shift out the
within,
trot line.
can't be a school within
Right.
somewhere else.
I mean, Trout Line's got some room.
Yeah.
But then you gotta shift up to Blades.
Domino effect.
Right, so you get this, yeah, you get this domino effect, right? So it's like, well, that doesn't work. If you look at a map and where the schools are, you go, man, it ought to be Beasley, because there's nothing around Beasley, right? I mean, you gotta drive to get there anyway now, so why not make it a choice school? Well, then, you got the same domino effect of, where do you move those kids? Because Fordham doesn't have much room at all.
Beerbohm's full.
Beerbohm's full, no room at all. And then, so OES doesn't have room.
No.
Lowland really, a little
20.
bit. So the shifting gets ever more complicated because and everybody knows this, but the big challenge in boundary and redistricting is 255. You know, and that's not, 255 is not, and 270 is not as much an issue at Beasley, because it's easy to get across there. But over here by the wall, I mean, it's like driving around an island. You know, so just the time it takes to get around it is such a challenge. So, yeah, I mean,
So let me build on what
Logistically, it's got
Kevin.
all this problems with it. Is the
Let me build on what Kevin's talked about. What if we took a school like Trotline and made it half? In other words, kind of split it half and half. So you're not moving all
School within a
500.
school.
School within a school, kind of like what you're talking about with the
Same
high
problems,
schools.
though.
A school within a school, you've got a lot of room at Trotline. You've got some potential spillover space at Washington, maybe if you need it, if that works. I don't know if it does. But a school within a school. And then you're only shifting half of the students out of Trotline.
I don't know if we can do that number-wise necessarily, because one of the things that we need to do in all of this is we've got to relieve pressure from beer bong.
Yes.
We've got to relieve pressure there, and we need Troutline to relieve some of that pressure.
Like I said, it'd be maybe more dominoes, but it solves a little, kind of, it takes the next step from what Kevin suggested. Instead of shifting an entire school like Beasley or Hageman out to another school, you're shifting half of Trotline
How
out to
many,
another school.
how many first grade classrooms do we have per building? For instance, 2, 3?
We have 3 at ours.
I mean, is it
2
2?
to 5 or 6 at Beer Bong?
I mean,
5.
I'll try not to get into my opinions on how the process works, because we're playing with different ideas. I mean, is there a way that you take 5 first grade classrooms around the district, and they're not in one building? And I get the culture thing, but I mean, and you put the 5 excited, innovative teachers there, and you can serve more kids because they're in the current buildings that they are. Instead of having one building, you have with 3 first grade classrooms teaching innovative. You pick 3 first grade classrooms across the district. You don't have to move that many kids around. You put the teachers in those classrooms, and then you're moving kids, parents who have to drive their kids anyway. You can get a point because there's one, or you can get a Hageman because there's one. And then if it's working,
You
it's
think
easier
parents are going to
expand
like
to other-
that? You don't think parents will find that disruptive?
No.
We have to drive to the School of Innovation now.
They got to drive to the School
I'm
of Innovation. Other parents in the school? No.
What do you mean? What part
I
of
don't know
that?
what's going on in the classroom next to me ever.
So the.
What part do you think would be?
Scott and I have actually had somewhat of that conversation. And his concern is that if the 3 of us are first grade or second grade teachers in the building, and if I'm doing something way different than them, it's not, it's a little bit of a building culture, but it's the 3 of us not working together. And I don't have anybody else
I get that, but I feel like for whatever our recurring cost is, I mean, you could do, even if we incurred a little bit of cost, you could still save a lot of the recurring cost by having to hire new teachers if they had the professional development in the same way. And then it would be Dr. Clark's responsibility for kind of managing that, because he would be the czar of innovation within this. I mean, isn't there a logistic way of making that work? I've always just wondered why we were given one option, like School of Innovation, as if we did this, this is how it would work. If we did this, this is how it would work. If we did this, this is how, and kind of have a different presentations and analysis on different ways of doing this, the costs involved, the pros and the cons, the benefits, you know, I mean.
The belief of the people who have really put the time and effort and work is, if in order to be successful, in order to try to push and scale out, we need it all in one place.
I agree with that. I think that the students would notice, even if they were in first grade, that they weren't all being taught the same.
Well, that's no different than what we have. I mean, that's kind of what we have now. Like Lisa Myers is kindergarten at Rogers, and the other kindergarten teacher over there is a good teacher, but more traditional, but Lisa kind of is, you know, she's allowed to do her own thing. She meets the standards well, and you know, that's.
So that's a good, so you're talking about like putting kindergarten first and second. And
Yeah,
like,
instead of creating
that's a good idea.
a new charter school in the district, why aren't we doing the schools within the schools?
So yeah, pick 4 schools, kindergarten first and second, or first, second, and third.
One classroom per
One
school.
classroom, and you can choice in if you want to. If you want to
You'd eliminate your need for the facilities.
Cafeteria expansion.
You'd be using the teachers in the classroom, so you wouldn't have to hire new teachers. I mean, you'd eliminate half the cost. My thing is that we were given one option, and I kind of want to see option B and not, you know, what's behind curtain 2 and curtain 3, so we can have the in-depth conversations. And then we may decide back to the original point of, you know, it was option A all along. But I'm curious about, you know,
I
curtain
think
2.
my only curtain 2 I know of, Jamie, through my studies and fellowship and so forth, would be for us as a district, since we're heavily involved right now in CCI, we're just in year 1 here, CCI, STEM, all of those different pieces. To me, it would be when we get to the end of that 3-year, if we want to commit as a district to a 3 to 5 year rollout of personalized learning that would happen, you know, X amount of elementary schools, you know, if you're going to do it middle school, high school, this is year 1 rollout, this is year 2, this is year 3 to 5 year rollout. And every year you're going to have to put hundreds of thousands of PD behind it, which is okay. You're going to have all the digital tools in place, and you're going to do that systematically. You know, to me, that's curtain 2, and that's not a bad curtain. It's just a totally different way of doing it. I think, you know, intelligent minds can disagree on those. I mean, from all the superintendents I've talked to, and Chris has got a much bigger network than me, those are your 2 approaches. You either go our approach where you have a kind of a one school that's a laboratory and it goes out that way, or you have a couple schools roll out a year and you support it and coach it that way. I mean, to me, that's curtain A and curtain B. I don't know if I'm missing anything.
Yeah, my other question with pushing it out, I mean, personalized learning is great for some kids, right? We have one cookie cutter approach to education, kind of, and we're introducing a second approach to education. And I don't want, I guess in the long run, I have a question, are we replacing cookie cutter A with cookie cutter B eventually? Because some kids are going to thrive in a personalized learning environment, learn at your own pace. Other kids really need structure and really need a traditional environment because they're going to drown in the other system. So we're replacing cookie cutter B with cookie cutter, you know, A with cookie cutter B, or are we having AB kind of going forward?
When we went to Lewis and Clark, when Chris drove us out there, that was a long drive, by the way.
He drove us back too, which was the good part.
Yeah.
So they got the School of Innovation thing.
Right.
It's the personalized learning, and they got the project-based learning. And the biggest thing, I mean, like what I said in the beginning, I think the personalized learning is where it's at. And one of the questions I asked that principal and I asked the superintendent, because he dropped in for a little bit, was, do you view this as something that is good for some kids, or do you think all education at elementary level should be done this way? And it wasn't any hesitation. All of it should be this way. And looking around, going through in the classrooms and actually getting an in-depth explanation from one of the teachers of how they run one of these. Personalized learning isn't just a second way of doing things that not every kid's going to thrive in. I mean, it's multiple ways geared towards every kid. And that's what really strikes me with it, because I met one of our elementary teachers in Dearborgs today when I was getting the plates. And we were talking a little bit about that. When I was in grade school, I hated it because it was everybody sitting in rows, the traditional thing. I didn't even know why I should be there. But looking at what they were doing at Lewis and Clark with this thing where they were addressing each kid, you know, with where they were at, how they were doing it, if they figured something out quick, they got to go out and do this personalized stuff. Nobody was screwing around. Everybody, even when they were out in the main area, was working on their stuff. It was just absolutely amazing to see. I don't know that I'm saying this the best way, but it's not just like another option. I think it's truly the way we should be going to for everybody. So it's when we first talked about this, it was we're going to keep the traditional. And what I'm saying right now is probably scary to a lot of people if they're watching this. But, you know, this probably is where we need to go to teach every kid at their level with where they're at. and not just a separate way, and traditional is, the great way for a lot, because
Well, then that
traditional
sounded more
falls
like
into
B
it.
to me, though.
I think the term blended is where we're really hitting on, when I've sat in on the implementation team and that group is, they talk a lot about kind of what you're talking about, Jamie, that, you have students that, we're not just going to drop them into, hey, here's a project and just work on your own all day, because that could be a disaster even for kids that are choosing to be in that environment. So they're really looking at how would you blend some traditional aspects. There's still going to be the teacher in the front of the classroom doing some lecturing. There's going to be some components of that, and there'll be some project pieces. There'll be more voice and choice and some of those pieces. But you're right, we don't want to, we don't want to go whole out and just lose all the other good aspects of. Because you're right, it works for a good chunk of kids.
One of the options was personalized learning, and Larry and I were talking with the teacher that told us that when she was going through all of them. I forget what, I think I asked the question about what if a kid, isn't getting it with that? Because part of it is that they assess every child after they go through their 2 blocks. So if their block is they choose to go out in that common area and do their own thing to learn it, guided, but do their own thing, and they're not getting it, that's no longer an option for them. They're not allowed to choose that one. They have to take one of the other 2 options. So there's that constant assessment going on through this entire thing too. It was really impressive seeing it.
The interesting thing about that approach, we talked about the team teaching with literally four classroom equivalents in terms of numbers together. The rotating roles the teachers could take on. One could be teaching the previous lesson for the kids that needed to bridge back in. They'd do an instruction to everybody of here's the new topic, and then based upon their selection, they'd either go out and work on it their own, or they'd kind of work in a small group. But they always had to come back as a confirmation of where they were with that step before they progressed. It was interesting how it looked to me how that implicitly, without them knowing it, their decision-making skills were being honed.
If people haven't seen
You see,
it though,
guys, this
and
is
understand
21st century learning. The traditional learning is gone.
Well, yeah.
Or it should
I
be.
think we're
It's
all
not the
sold
one way
on an
just
innovative
lecture to
model.
kids anymore.
No.
The question is how do we implement it?
Right, I get that, I get that.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think that through all of our conversations, the idea is a great idea. And I think it is a necessity in teaching and learning for today and
Yes.
for the future. I think something that seems to just keep flashing like a neon sign is the finance committee stood there and said, well, we can get this up and running, but we can't afford to continue to do it.
Yep.
And it's really hard to say.
Well, Lisa,
well,
that's not what they said exactly. They said that we would be spending in the deficit 1 year sooner than we will be anyway. If.
I think they recommended not having reoccurring costs.
Well, and it was-
But that's why. It's because we would be there 1 year
Because we
sooner.
would
We
reach
don't have a revenue source to supplement.
deficit spending 1 year earlier than what they
we're targeted
anticipate.
right now.
Okay, but their recommendation was not to go into reoccurring spending, bottom line.
And a lot of-
It's hard to just jump on a bandwagon and say, we need to do this. I'm a firm believer that we need to do this. I have 2 children who would respond really well to this type of learning. But it is hard to commit whenever somebody has just said, but even if it's not next year, and it's 2 years, or it's 3 years down the road, suddenly your deficit spending is that, can you commit to that? Is it real? Does Marshall agree? Are we gonna have some?
It's a risk, Lisa.
Windfall?
It's a
Yes,
risk.
and high risk
Education.
equals high reward, I get it. but
Education and every
that's just
form
where
of
I struggle.
education is a risk.
But
Whatever
what we
form is a
have to
risk,
do is
but
mitigate the risk and make sure we have the
I just
best,
have
That's
to
right.
feel-
best
I just
business
have to feel good
intelligence.
about
Absolutely.
not putting
That was the
community
reason I
and
think
students
Prop
at
R
risk.
was successful, because of the due diligence and the
I
homework
completely agree.
and the risk mitigation that went on.
Right. And my conversation around this has, if you've kind of noticed, hasn't been how do we not do the School of Innovation. It's how do we do it in alternative ways to mitigate that risk, to eliminate that spending, to in-house it in a way that we can still achieve the same goals, but we don't have to incur the costs to get there. Which is where my request of like I really want to study how we could do this further, but that's a conversation we can have.
This becomes an easy decision if we're able to offset the cost.
Correct.
Yes.
That's-
Oh, absolutely.
That's it, exactly. If-
Well, then maybe
if
that's,
someone-
that's more.
I don't want to be
direction
the
that
voice
you
of
go.
gloom and doom, but at some point, I'm not saying it's going to happen next year or the year after, but surely you all didn't think Prop R was the last time we're ever going to have to ask for a tax
No, but
increase.
that doesn't mean we shouldn't make the best decisions.
But by
along the way.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I don't think we should be wasteful.
What 1 year of, being able to continue investing in our classroom is
So
Sure.
far off the mark. We were so
Just-
far off the mark.
Just one comment that just we've had previously, and I respect the work of the Finance Committee, but I do think if you're going to go to a group of fiscal conservatives, which is their job, and you're going to ask them about any recurring cost. So anything we're going to do that's going to be a reoccurring cost that is going to potentially, hopefully, improve student achievement or take us in a new direction is going to me, it's common sense. What did we ask them? If we spend more money, is that going to move up, ultimately when revenues and expenditures hit? And the answer was, yeah. It's going to be, 6 years instead of 7, or I believe that was the timeline. So I just, at some point, and it's a tough board decision, I'm not saying it's not, but at some point, many of you are still going to be here in 6 or 7 years, and we're going to hit that point in 7 years?
I don't think so.
Me.
I don't think so.
Okay, some of you won't. Or you're going to hit it in 6 years. And still, ultimately, those decisions that got us there. So how many things historically, too, could we look back? And if we would have ran every decision by the Finance Committee in terms of, hey, should we add, lit coaches? Should we go down this curricular path? Or things that you can look back on that have been successful. If you're looking at it from a purely financial decision, is it ultimately going to speed up the time where we need more money? Of course, the answer is going to be yes.
Yes.
So I'm not saying this is an easy decision, but I'm saying that, to me, that shouldn't be the end-all, be-all and the end of this discussion. The discussion is, we got to put this, we got to put this thing in the scales here, and is that 1 year, ultimately, if all the projections are correct, is that 1 year, is it worth it to put this into place and the impact it's going to have on the district? Or is it ultimately, no, that's too much of a risk and we don't know that it's worth it?
And that's the information that we're just looking for. And we just heard that maybe going to phase 2 might free up funding where it can be moved somewhere else. And maybe that's the answer. And I actually believe that not doing this is a far greater risk to our district and our students and our community than moving forward and running out of money earlier. And I'm not so naive to think that we're not ever going to have to go back to the community, because we were so far behind that it's crazy to think that.
But
we can
even with
actually
that big
move the
increase, we're
district.
still second from the bottom.
But I mean, running out of money. Think of what we just went through when we ran out of money, though. We had teachers
busing,
leaving in
cut
scores.
busing.
We had programs cut. We had, our school district suffered from that. And do we want to handle that a year?
Yeah, we really want to be
But we
proactive
may
when
not
it's
have
coming
to. So
up.
that's my question. So do we have the opportunity to have that funding versus the answer was no, it's just not there? And what I heard tonight was, well, maybe we might have an opportunity to be able to move funding around to different initiatives based on change in what we've done for the last many, many, many years. We become more efficient and effective as a district. And we do that by figuring out the progressive education pieces that we actually need and that work. And we fund that based on flex schedules and less A&P and TAP and whatnot. Those acronyms don't mean anything to me. So, so do we have that possibility? Maybe we do tonight. But before that conversation, it was kind of a closed-off conversation of, you're going to drain the district. I mean, that was a presentation that was a little shocking of like, really? Wow, I wouldn't have thought. That's a pretty small reoccurring cost, but whatever. Because you round 100,000s, I don't think that reoccurring cost is so bad.
I rounded dimes.
But it's a big deal for people.
I think the important thing here is, from a governance perspective, do we view this as an operational or tactical decision, or we look at it as a strategic decision? I think it's
I
strategic.
think we have to look at it.
I think it's one of those, if we don't take a look at this we're going to get run over. I think we have to
We
adapt.
are.
Is it if you're going to look at a strategy, you look at risk a little bit differently, but we still have to understand the economics of it.
We do. We are accountable for it.
And I think one of the reasons the Finance Committee is very conservative in their approach is, sometimes projections are wrong. And I almost hate to bring this up, but back in 2007, the CFO of the district told us we could afford 6% raises across the board. And that board at that time in 2007 voted for 6% raises. Turns out a year later, we were in financial distress,
Yeah, 'cause he
which
lied.
then eventually led to Prop T, the Prop T transfer, which eliminated our debt service levy, which this board no longer has the ability to take advantage of a debt service levy because that levy was gone because it covered up for a previous mistake. So sometimes Finance Committee folks are very conservative because, and I lived it, and Larry lived it too.
Yep.
And went through the same thing. We cut teachers, we froze salaries. It was really bad for the district. So I think that's probably why the concern from the Finance Committee is they're cautious because they certainly don't want to say yes. And then we live in a changing world, and like Larry had mentioned after the election, there's leadership changes in Washington, there's leadership changes in Jeff City. Some of the policy changes that might be coming through that all of the educators are going to have to deal with, something might be totally different, and there may not be funding for the changes that they're mandated to deal with. So I think that's probably why they're being cautious, and it's something we'll have to factor in as well, even though it's a great unknown what Jefferson City might do.
Having said that, I think from a governance perspective, when we get the recommendation on CSOI, for consideration, I believe on the 18th, I think it's going to have the economic issue spelled out.
clear.
And we know exactly what risk level we're taking, and if we're willing to take that risk, we'll do it.
So this is at the risk of not doing. So if you follow a perhaps crazy scenario, and that is a scenario where we have expansion of charters, we would be right for that. We've got population density for it, and we've got empty spaces where that could happen. So if a charter school were to come in this model and take 300 kids, it would cost us between $1.5 million and $2 million probably, if not more, is what we would be sending out the door.
For how
To
many
do
kids?
what?
300 kids?
So do we do it as a
To do
district
what?
before somebody comes and does it?
But we could still lose that if someone feels that there are neighboring districts that are higher performing. And it doesn't guarantee, it doesn't.
They feel it. You just have to look at data. I mean,
Sorry.
to some degree.
I mean, that's a crazy possible
I don't think
scenario.
it's crazy at all.
And really, I mean, we kind of looked at, do you open this as a charter school sponsored by the district? And there were two really reasons why to say no. One is how you determining the governance structure of it. And two is you would have to send a specific amount of money to that school. So that it would then take away from everybody else.
But you can charge them for the services that you provide. So if we provide accounting services to the charter school, we can bill them for that. If we provide food service, we can bill them for that. There may be a way.
Still, I mean,
It was,
Didn't offset it enough for it to be a favorable choice.
And you don't know how it's going to handle the if it's going to be based on our ADA, or they're going to have a dollar amount. That's still up in the air, too.
Well, and I think one of the things, if we go back to your original meeting back in January, I mean, I know you were very much in favor
Yes.
of the School of Innovation because it also opened up for freeing up more spots for early childhood.
Right.
We got those numbers today as far as what we have on a waiting list for our early childhood programs as well. So I think as we go through, the next couple weeks and we start thinking about all of this, we really need to take into consideration everything that we have going on. Are we able to expand our early childhood, which we know how pertinent that is for our kids? We had talked about the expansion of summer school, being able to help maybe offset some of the cost. Are there other things that we can do in the district that can kind of bump up those revenue resources that would, again, help offset that? Do we task the administration with, we need you to squeak if we're going to do this, which means we need you to find these positions within what we have to be able to do that. So just a few things to think about as we go. And then, you know, again, I go into looking at it as, do you continue being a leader, or do you continue following, or do you want to finally be a leader? And so we've got a lot of thoughts and decisions to make behind all of this. And tonight was, you know, more about, I don't think there is any question about the actual concept of School of Innovation. I think it's just more around the resources of it. I have a little bit different view about, you know, the Finance Committee and their recommendation. I appreciate everything that they did for us. But again, if I look at just what they were off this year, what they've been off in previous years, just as I've been on the board, they're off a lot more in a positive way.
Don't question them. I know of people that did, and they got lambasted for it by a lot of people in this room.
I'm not going to ask who that was.
I don't question the methodology at all. So, to me, it's like shooting at a target. And the more we're off in the beginning, the farther we're off on that target, the farther out it is. So, if our baseline is off between now and June, then all of the projections are off. The methodology is sound. It's just,
it's a moving target.
If the baseline changes, which it will, then everything else changes. But the methodology is fine.
And you know, with what Marshall does, he's very conservative, and so is our Finance Committee. But name a year that we, you know, how long has it been since we have been negative over not having the positive? And I'm not saying that is the reason why you go ahead and you spend that money not knowing what that is. But my point is that I have a hard time viewing that we're broke. And that's kind of what you normally get, the feeling that if we spend anything at all, we're going to be broke, but then you can turn around and hand me $1 million right now and I can spend it on whatever I want, and that's no big deal.
So they meant one time, that's a one-time
I understand.
expense.
I understand.
The thing about the CSOI is...
But I look at how much can I expand that $1 million out for.
Sure.
It's an educational tool. I mean, it is something that is, its purpose is to better the education we're giving our kids, improve test scores. It's not some willy-nilly jewel sort of a thing. It is truly what we're here to do. The cost is the part of it that's a bit of a problem, and I think there's one other thing to it too, and that's that as much as I really appreciate everything you guys talked about with math tonight, I mean, as I think the last board meeting we learned a lot, this one we learned even more. I like the direction you're going, and I feel a lot better now that I feel like I understand it a lot better. But there is a perception, I think, in our community that, hey, we gave you a Prop R, fix what you have. Why are you going for this other thing? And people don't really understand the benefits of this kind of instruction, or why it is a culture change from what we currently have, that just saying we're going to change all 10 of our elementary schools tomorrow isn't going to happen. It is going to take doing it, as you had said, in a place, making sure it sticks, using it as something to move to the next one. I do think it's something that goes to every elementary school, but it's not an overnight thing. It's something that has to happen somewhere, take hold, and then you start to expand it sequentially. Got stuck there. But we do have that perception. People don't understand it, and I think there really is a fix what you have before you come to me, and I think one of the dangers is if we move up, when we have to go to the community by a year, and we don't have the math scores fixed, we're going to get the, what did you do with the money I gave you last time? You bunch of clowns, I'm not giving you anything else.
But the question is do you continue to fix things the way you've always fixed them, or do you do something different?
But they're not doing it the way we've always done them.
Is it a matter of fixing it,
differently.
or is it just the fact that we might be doing it differently?
But it's almost there is a somewhat short-term, short to intermediate term setting up for the long term, and CSOI is more of a long term. So there's kind of the fix what we have and investing for the future if we can afford it, and if we don't get into a potential catch-22 of we don't meet the goals quick enough, and now we don't have the public with us, and the community turns on us at that point.
It'll be 10 years before they come back.
Because the problem is, they're not going into this with us right now. At least everything I see from a public perspective is that they do not understand why this is important or why we would spend this money.
Right.
And they heard the same thing. They heard the finance committee say we shouldn't do this.
Yes.
That was my point, is they said, you can set it up, but the reoccurring piece, we wouldn't recommend.
Yes.
And that's a very strong statement.
So I think the public,
To educate around that.
the public might rightfully demand results first.
Yes.
Knowing how poor our math scores are, our science scores are, public perception might say, look, let's fix what we need to fix, and then build on that.
I think we all know where we live, and we all know that is what our community expects.
Yes.
And if we take a risk, we better achieve those results
Quickly.
before we go asking for anything.
Right.
Or we're going to get
And I think,
that thrown back
we
at
realize
us.
that, and that's part of the issue in the timing.
Yes.
Like I said, these things build on each other, and some of the things that were done in 2007, which led to Prop T in 2008, which totally eliminated our debt service levy because it was necessary to save the district back then. Those are all sequential decisions that have built up over time. But this will be one of them.
Yeah. And yet this is, educationally, this is such a smart thing to do.
You remember,
I would argue it's
That's-
essential.
remember a few years ago, the grief we got, I think there was, we established, 5 or 6 assistant principals in the buildings, and we took all kinds of grief of, why are you spending money for this? Why do you need other administrators?
For what are you talking about?
You remember when we put the secondary principals in the buildings? There were like 6 of them we did in about 3 years.
I don't remember a time when we added principals. I've always been here at a time when we've eliminated principals.
No, I'm
I
talking
don't
about-
ever remember adding them.
Like Chad D. Kemper and all those guys.
No, but he took over a teacher that retired
Yeah,
at
but
Oakville Elementary.
we were around when we put those all in, and we took grief from the community that we were spending money for second administrators on elementary buildings,
I mean,
and that paid off for
I
us.
don't remember. Jeff, when Chad came in and when other principals came in, they replaced teachers that retired, or when principals moved up to central office, they were replaced.
No, they started out as assistant principals.
I don't remember ever
Yeah,
adding
they did.
principals in my tenure.
Part-time assistant principal, part-time curriculum.
Chad was the assistant for me at Blades, yeah.
Yeah, and then he
We had
moved over to Oakville.
half a
and then
dozen at one time, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions we ever made in terms of a farm system here.
Of course, when
we
you
took a lot
came
of
here,
grief for
Jeremy
that. That
took
was a
over your
strategic
spot
decision.
at Blades, right? Yeah.
Well anyways, I'm just.
And Patrick, for you.
I'm proud we're talking about new schools and not tennis courts, so good job, board.
Oh, wow.
We didn't even get to the auditorium.
And at that point, it's almost 9:30. We're just going to stop right now. Thank you, Jamie.
What about the auditorium?
Do I move for adjournment? So good, I move for adjournment.
Which part?
Tennis courts.
The auditorium.
Auditorium, yeah.
So I'll make this
Back
comment.
to the auditorium. Let's get to the tennis court.
It took bold action by the board to do that, otherwise it wouldn't be here.
It's true.
People can like the decision or dislike the decision,
Generally, this
but it took bold action to do that.
I agree. And we, in a way, we kind of paid for it too.
So-
Because of some people who ran against it. I'm not mentioning names, but there was a whole series of folks that ran against it.
That's what Mrs.
You're-
ran against,
yeah.
right?
And that was a risk, you're right, absolutely, it was a risk.
Some things just don't get done without
Right.
Taking risks.
bold action.
That's true.
Taking a risk, getting out of your comfort zone, and doing something different. And to me, the auditorium is here, when I got here, it's a great asset.
We were the only district in St. Louis County that didn't have one.
Well, the problem is that Oakville doesn't have it.
That's correct, that is a problem.
That's the
And
problem.
the goal was to eventually get them one, but now I don't know when that's gonna be.
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.